Old World, Florida.
Old World, Florida.
Old World, Florida. Dude, I'm telling you, dude. Dr. Narco Longo came on and dropped the hammer of the god.
America's mother, daughter of Atlantis. God sent the weatherland. The devil sent the Spanish. Florida is Eden, the fountain of youth. Kali is deception. So Florida is the truth.
Welcome to Florida, baby.
Dr. Narco Longo.
Florida, it is everything. There's too much truth bomb being dropped. I can't digest it all.
Old World, Florida.
Please welcome Dr. Narco Longo.
Howdy, everyone. Happy Monday, June 2nd. Coming to you live from Palm Beach County, Florida. We're in, at least I am, sorry. I'm in the Dancing Elephant bookstore in Lake Worth Beach, Florida. Now, sometimes I mention that, sometimes I don't. But it's going to be very relevant to this episode. Because one of the Beatles spent time in this bookstore, or at least when it was in another location. But he was here, he was pulling some of these books off the shelves. But we're talking about the Beatles tonight. And might I remind you, the Dancing Elephant is Florida's #1 spiritual, metaphysical, religious book and crystal store. And John Lennon used to go there. So we're going to get into that. But just keep that in mind, Dancing Elephant. And we're talking Beatles tonight. Talking Beatles, conspiracy theories, esoteric symbolism, their connections to Florida, and of course, how you can see in the title there, how the Beatles broke up in Florida. Not many people know about that. Barely anybody knows about that. Even the Beatles, fanboys. When I see someone with a Beatles T-shirt, I always tell them something about Florida. And barely anyone knows that. Not only did the Beatles break up in Florida, they broke up in Disney World. Classic. Disney World. How about that? Disney World in Florida. But we're going to get into a whole bunch of Beatles conspiracy theories. Not that that's the best word, but that's kind of the most, everyone understands what we mean by that. But we got Seth here. We've got Reverend Rodney Stone. And this is continuing our Monday music series with a little bit of Florida. So we'll start off with Seth here. How's your day going, man?
It's going good, dude. Literally, my head's just been spinning with the overwhelming rabbit holes of the Beatles. I've been trying to sort of approach this, in a stepwise fashion, and you can't. There's so much to it, from Paul to, John's death to their music. Like, their music is a whole study in itself. I think you could probably make your whole life's work studying the Beatles conspiracies, because I think after having studied it intensively for the last few weeks in anticipation of the show, I think this is one of the largest psyops in the world, one of the largest cultural creations and social experiments and sort of live, psychological operations in the world. And I mean, I've gone through many rabbit holes, and this one is intense. It's so buckle up, everybody. And we're not going to get to everything either. You know what I mean? And I don't think any of us are 100% experts. I do want to shout out eventually some of the main researchers of Beatles conspiracy, because you can follow up on their channels and learn a lot more. I might drop a couple details or miss a little thing here and there. That's because I don't dedicate my whole life to this particular study. It's really intense. I think if you guys want to follow up, definitely check out The Memoirs of Billy Shears by Thomas U. Harriot. The Sage of Quay, Mike Williams is one of the main Paul is Dead researchers. Mark Devlin, who wrote the musical conspiracy books. He's a British guy who studied a lot of this. And also Sharon Clemens. She has got a really interesting book out there and interesting stuff. So I've just been swimming in that, man. And also been walking around my neighborhood finding mangoes on the ground. So that's what I've been doing.
Well, Paul liked to walk around with a golden apple in his hand, an actual apple, golden color. You'll see that. But Son and Mensch, how about you, mein Freund? Hey.
All is good. Yeah, everything's great. Good to see you boys. This is gonna be a good one. So, like Elliot says, buckle up and strap in, because you're gonna need double reinforcements on this one. Yeah, the bit when you said psychological experiment, I agree completely, because I dove in that down pretty deep rabbit holes with that as well. And it doesn't mean they're not a great band, talented musicians and stuff, but like the motives and intentions behind the music is like something that people tend to kind of not look at. And kind of like also the dichotomy between the Rolling Stones and Beatles. I don't know if we're going to go into how they were like two sides of one coin with that British invasion, but that's something interesting as well. I'm excited. Let's go.
Sure, yeah. Well, people, like Seth said, there's almost no one way to approach this. Even going linearly, chronologically, it's tough. Like Seth said, I'm no Beatles expert. How about we start off with this? Personally, I don't really like the Beatles.
Oh,
I never really liked their music.
Shots fired.
And honestly, you know what? I'm going to retract that statement.
Actually, never mind.
Actually, they fucking suck. And they blow. And just because they're very much a quantity over quality type of band. That's just my take. Number one, they started the whole femboy Jonas Brothers thing. They're the original Jonas Brothers. They're the original Jonas Brothers. They were.
The British Jonas Brothers.
And I just want to say there's a lot of crazes that I did fall for growing up. Like, dude, there was a time period where I was hook, line, and sinker Red Hot Chili Peppers till I die, okay?
I still am.
Would watch their concerts. Green Day, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Nirvana, a little bit cooler, but the Beatles, I never fell for them. Never really just, and I don't mean fall for the psyop. I mean, I just never really, really loved their stuff. There's a couple songs that I do like, but even when I read the lyrics to those songs, I'm like, should I even be liking this? Is it the tune? Is the content? Is the tune being poisoned by the lyrical content? The Beatles, to me, always represented like the boomer establishment, like the kind of fake hippie, fake free love, fake this, fake that.
Yeah.
That's I'm a little tough on them because I never really liked their music that much. So I think they're overrated. I think they're kind of like the Grateful Dead. I can't stand the Grateful Dead. But when I see the people, they're not as bad as the Grateful Dead in some areas, but they really pioneered the whole MK Ultra mind control. You like this music and you don't even have a choice, pretty much. I think there's people who never even had a choice as to whether they like the Beatles. Just the scientific lab experiments and the things they were putting into their music long before Skrillex and all these DJs, did that stuff. I think it worked on a lot of people. I think they were dumping every little trick in the book they had, MK Ultra, Aleister Crowley trick they had in the book, into their music and just seeing what stuck. And that wasn't how it always was. They started out covering like Bo Diddley and Bob Dylan and stuff, but
it's interesting how they were repackaging American blues music and selling it back to America, but they were like, quote unquote, the British invasion. Mm-hmm. So, but I totally agree with you about kind of being the boomer establishment band. I mean, my parents, and by the way, if my parents ever hear this, I'm sorry. They love the Beatles, especially my mom. Like, I grew up listening to the Past Masters Volume 2 CD in our car, which is a collection of singles from the later years. So We Can Work It Out, Lady Madonna, The Inner Light. The Inner Light is actually one of my top Beatles songs. So I kind of grew up default appreciating them, default linking it to my childhood in a way. And then when I was teaching guitar full time after college, it was around the same time the Beatles Rock Band was coming out. And so all my students wanted to learn Beatles songs. So I was just learning Beatles songs every single day and teaching them and playing with my students. So I sort of was, like you said, kind of forced to like them by default. And if you think that like they wrote all their own music, then you can kind of see how they might be the best band in the world. But after having dug into them, they did not write all their own music. They probably didn't write much of it at all, to be honest with you. And that sounds crazy if you haven't actually dug into this conspiracy. It sounds crazy. You're like, oh no, they were the best. They were, Lennon McCartney, greatest songwriting team ever. No, Tavistock Institute was the songwriting team, guys.
Heyo.
And
they were Adorno.
Yeah, I think he was one of, some people claim, like John Coleman claims that he was like the main songwriter for them. There were probably definitely a whole team of people. Mm-hmm.
Mal Evans ended up getting paid for Beatles songs that he initially wasn't credited for, but they had a deal that after a couple of years he would get paid for. So
and do you know who gets them now? Or Michael Jackson had the rights to Beatles songs for a while too.
Mm-hmm. Let's save. Yeah, good point. Let's save that for the end. That's another Florida connection a little bit.
And as far as them writing their own music, the story just doesn't add up. Like the math doesn't math. They claim that they wrote 100 songs.
6 million songs over 7 years.
Oh,
that just doesn't compute, people.
That's what they say.
6 million songs.
They say between 19. They say during like the Hamburg years or whenever they were playing in Germany.
Oh, Hamburg.
Between 1956 and 1962, they wrote 100 songs. But then when they got their first record contract, the first songs they put out were 2 covers of My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean and When the Saints Go Marching In, which is like the easiest cover you could possibly. That's what I teach all the students, you know what I mean, for their first song to learn on the trumpet is When the Saints Go Marching In. So, if they wrote 100 songs in that time, I'm sure one of them would have been good enough to record their own original. But so that's the first thing you got to see. That's just like, that doesn't make sense. I don't think they wrote many songs. And then if you hear George Martin's interviews, he actually, from the early days, he actually says they were nothing special. I didn't find a hit in their first batch of songs. And he was kind of confused as to why they were being chosen to be the next big band. And then within a few years, they're the biggest band in the world. So if you just dig into their timeline too, every 6 months putting out another LP, it really doesn't add up, guys. Mm-hmm. And someone just, Old World Micmac with the Fire. Creed wrote more hit songs than the Beatles. Last week we're talking about Creed, and I was defending Scott as being sort of an authentic artist, who's not that. I mean, they tried to control him with drugs and everything, but my opinion is that he was pretty authentic. This week, I don't think so. I'm pretty much taking the opposite stance that this band is an entirely created function of the deep state, if you will, the British intelligence.
Yeah, 100%. Son and Mensch, what's your experience with the Beatles and what's your takeaways after looking into them more?
Yeah, well, in high school, like towards the end of high school, I got into I didn't really grow up with them like Seth did. My parents didn't really listen to the Beatles that much, but I had a really good friend back in the Mitten, Michigan, who passed away and was like, you know about this, doctor, but
Right.
He passed away and he was like crazy for the Beatles. And I have a little, I don't know if you get, there we go, a little tattoo. Sorry, my house in the back is getting in the way, the lighting.
Yeah.
My real house back there. Okay, whatever.
The JRGL?
It's JGL. That's like my boy's initials. But
okay. Sorry.
yeah, no, it's cool. It seems like it could be their initials too,
right,
or
yeah.
something. That's
what
people
almost...
thought that, yeah. But I got into them. I mean, they're definitely linked with acid culture for sure. So when you start taking LSD and stuff, that's one of the go-tos, and you definitely like get more into them while you're tripping on that acid. But like listening to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds specifically, like stuff like that, you can see how they're like coded for straight up taking drug use and being in these like euphoric states. So I don't know if a lot of their music was made for, like you said, like MK Ultra purposes, where you're in like these kind of suggestive states, and then whatever they're pushing in gets pushed in.
Yeah.
Yeah, the why is a big interesting question. The why were they even created? Why were they pushed out? And I think it's partially to water down music. Like if you hear interviews, what does this song mean? What does this song mean? Paul and John and all them will say, oh, nothing really. It really doesn't mean anything. And it's kind of like Seinfeld. It's a show about nothing. And it's like it kind of just degenerates art in a way and kind of like waters it down.
The Beatles, okay, you know what they actually are? They are Division 1 gaslighters. That's what the Beatles were. They were D1 gaslighters.
D1.
Okay. They would
all
look
had
you
full
in the eye.
rides.
John would be like, we didn't know that it meant LSD. It just happened to be like that. LSD, Lucy. He's like, we didn't know that. We didn't try to do that. It's like, bro.
And then Paul's
you can just
like,
say you like taking LSD. Like,
Paul's like, shut up, John. They're all just like arguing.
But Son and Mensch, you've put out some content on the whole Laurel Canyon fiasco, right? And how even that tied into the Charlie Manson things.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually,
would it be fair to say that this is like the British version of the Laurel Canyon, MK Ultra, and paralleling the Grateful Dead experiments too?
Yeah, for sure. And they also are involved with Laurel Canyon to a degree. They have passed through there and like mingled with those musicians. But I've also done stuff on Tavistock, which Seth was mentioning, and how they engineer trends in society. And it started with, like shell-shocked British soldiers who had PTSD, and those were like the initial subjects at that facility for all this programming and all that. But also with the Ed Sullivan, I'm sure we'll get into that. Like that whole Ed Sullivan, they're coming to America.
Yeah.
Ed Sullivan show was totally fabricated too. I saw that and read that they actually hired those girls that were screaming like ballistically when they came off the plane and stuff. Like they hired those people as actors to kind of doll it all up. And it's like, why were these bitches, women, just like hysterically like flailing around and like crying. And it was like the same effect that the Rolling Stones had, you know, it's like.
Yeah.
It also distracted us from, you know, the big 1963 presidential assassination of John F. Kennedy.
That's a part of it too. Yeah.
And that was
right.
like the whole country was like wrecked after that. You know, it was televised. It was the president. It was on TV. Everybody saw it. It was on an occult, you know, day, which we've talked about plenty of times. And actually we'll see that 11/22 come back. Like 5 years after that, they released the White Album. And there's a lot of weird stuff with the dates. So I think they're doing this numerological black magic with the releases of this stuff. But a lot of it was really to like pacify Americans and distract us after JFK.
Let's start right there, Son and Mitch. That's a great place to start with the Beatles going on the Ed Sullivan Show. So the Beatles kind of started, I know this much, the Beatles started as kind of like almost like a teen party band, right? They were a little bit older. John Lennon, I think, was like 23 or 24 when it started, but they were kind of portraying themselves as like teens and part of the teen subculture. But they were a little bit older, you know, even back then. And they had like a greaser look. They would wear leather jackets and they'd grease their hair back. And that's kind of how they were, I guess, before they became a recorded band.
Before they became bowl cut tech swears.
And they actually really wanted to kind of look old and tough, right? And they'd, you know, the greaser thing. They kind of be a little tough, pop out the collar. Hey, Toots, what's up, girl? You know, stuff like that. Boom. In the blink of an eye, once they get their record deals, you know, my timeline might be a little off on this. They go from slicked back hair, leather jackets, to bowl cuts, prep school. Looked like they just got out of class at prep school. What makes a 25-year-old man want to go from dressing like Marlon Brando in the biker movie, like a badass, to then all of a sudden dressing like a 17-year-old in school?
Handlers.
That's the first thing we should notice about the Beatles is the big shift in their image before they were kind of a big thing. And go ahead.
I want to fill in a couple gaps between that 1962 when they're playing as rockers and then 64 with the British invasion. They started recording Please Please Me, which is their first LP, on September 11th, 1962. That record, their first LP, came out. Now, this got brought up when you guys were doing Ace Ventura. Someone said, oh, isn't 311 the number of Skull and Bones? No, 322 is. So they released Please Please Me on March 22nd, 1963. That's their first LP. It came out on Skull and Bones Day. Now, so Please Please Me is their Genesis, so to speak. If you guys go to Genesis chapter 3, verse 22, it says, and the Lord God said, behold, the man is become as one of us to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever.
And what would their own recording agency and label be known as? Apple Studios, right? Apple
Forbidden
Music.
Fruit. Yep.
So
yeah,
go ahead.
That's the Clash, right, or something? That's not.
That's the Beatles.
That's the Beatles, bro.
That's the Beatles in like 1962. They were greaser.
Nothing like, dude. Wow.
Well, the guy in the middle, I think, is their previous.
Okay,
bassist.
I was like, who the hell is that?
But
yeah, George in the back.
Is
that
Beatles.
Ringo? No, that's John. That's John sitting up there.
John on the right, George on the left.
He looks so much different.
And someone else in the middle.
Yeah, there was two other guys in the Beatles before Ringo came in, and one of the guitar players, like, he died. He got kicked in the head or something during a show, and then he died of complications shortly thereafter.
Classic Hamburg show, you know.
Yeah,
people getting kicked in the head twice a night.
Is that true? Who?
Yeah, it wasn't Pete Best. It was the other guy. I forget his name. Or maybe
Pete Wentz. Pete Wentz. It was Pete Wentz.
But yeah, anyway, so the first LP, 322. The second LP was 1122, 1963, the release of With the Beatles. So the same day that JFK was assassinated, they came out with their second EP, With the Beatles.
Look at that 5-piece Beatles right here. Who ordered the 5-piece Beatles? Child?
The Beatles.
Who ordered the honey garlic 5-piece Beatles, y'all? Mm-hmm.
Do you want some Ringo with that 5-piece?
And
1 second here.
Go for it.
We got a $4.99 tip from my brother. George Harrison, who I like, played the whole Yogi character, but Google his house, LOL. Yeah, we'll get to his
feel
house.
like
Let's bring it up.
I feel like George was actually kind of maybe one of the authentic ones. I mean, maybe that was the whole image he was playing, like the yogi, but
I think he was the weak one. So he might have had the most depth and character of them all.
He was definitely the most talented out of all.
But he didn't have much spine. So he was willing to play ball, I think, the longest. And then you see he taps out of the band on video. He quits on video, and it's almost like no one was really surprised. But he got cucked real hard, so we can't give him a pass on that.
Mega cuck.
Promoting cuck culture. That's the thing with this whole eat, pray, love fucking bullshit that all these Indian gurus were pumping down the Beatles.
Eat, pray, love. We
like,
eat, then we pray, then we love.
Eric Clapton was fucking ripping on coke and was tapping George Harrison's wife. And George Harrison was like, well, I guess I forgive him already. So just like, didn't care, you know, kind of let it go. Made jokes about it.
There's a fog, I think I'm gay.
Well, that's also part of the psyop, is to instill this idea of like free love and kind of destroy traditional values, introduce drugs and free love into society. I think that's a big part of why they were promoted so hard.
Yeah. And you guys see the Beatles there, the greaser Beatles. Greasy fucking 5-piece chicken tenders. And
5-piece circumcised tenders.
Then you got the 4-piece Beatles, squeaky clean, shampooed hair. They look like some black labs that just hopped out the fucking the doggy daycare bus. Okay. And then they're squeaky clean, dressed to the nines. Yeah, that's what they used to look like. Greaser Beatles. That wasn't selling enough records. So boom, we get Mr. Meanie. What was his name? Mr. Meanie, is that
what
is the guy's name?
Who?
Sweeney, Mr. Sweeney, the teacher from whatever. Never mind. They look nerdy. They look geeky.
Eastbound and Down.
No.
Oh.
Look at that. What the hell are they wearing?
Yeah, that's definitely to appeal to the.
They look dapper.
The 1960s.
They're wearing English school teacher, like woman, female outfits.
Mm-hmm. So that's the first big shift as far as culture, social engineering, Tavistock, right? The greaser thing was like the 50s thing. Maybe it was old, maybe it was dead. They wanted something new. And the Beatles with their bowl cuts were pushing an agenda, folks. Okay, don't let it go over your head. But 1964 is when they went on the Ed Sullivan Show, or they came to America. Is that correct?
Something like that.
64, February 7th, they arrived in America. February 11th, they were on the Sullivan Show.
Now, the Ed Sullivan Show, one of the times they performed was in Miami. Was that time, or was the first one in a different location?
I don't know.
Let me double check this. Okay, Beatles' first U.S. concert, February 11th, 1964, Washington Coliseum in Washington, D.C. according to this AI search
A
bar.
cult.
But I guess it's when they went on Ed Sullivan. Wait, is this thing fucking retarded? Dude, AI is so goddamn stupid. February 9th, they were on the Ed Sullivan Show. 1964. That would be before that.
It's definitely February 64.
Yeah. February 9th, 1964. They played on the Ed Sullivan Show. I just want to make sure that's the one in Miami. Talk for a sec.
Yeah, because this AI might be giving us different stuff. It says the first show in the United States was on February 11th in DC. The day before they had made their American debut on the Ed Sullivan Show. So they did like a televised performance, and then they did a live show. Maybe you look up where the Ed Sullivan Show was.
Okay, here we go.
Taped.
Here we go. This is reliable information. Okay. September 9th or 8th, they played one show for Ed Sullivan. Then they had another show, February. Then in September, guess what day? September 11th, 1964, the Beatles go down to Florida to play for Ed Sullivan again, this time in Miami. Let's pull that up on screen.
John Lennon also released his Imagine video on the Dick Cavett Show on September 11th, 1971.
Ooh.
There we go.
Is that right?
Oh, September 11th. Sorry, this was first and only time in Florida. 37-minute show at Jacksonville's Old Gator Bowl. Almost didn't happen. Let's see. When did they go on Ed Sullivan Show? Dude, what the hell? Dude,
it's giving us different.
You can't, yeah. This is okay. We're not experts, folks, as you can see, but basically, the internet's no help either. So I know they were in Florida. So let's just go off the pictures, I guess.
Yeah, it says, look, lower, it says they were in Miami Beach on February 16th. No, like that same paragraph you were on.
Yeah, so they did a big American tour that winter.
Wikipedia is reliable. The Beatles made several appearances on the Ed Sullivan Show, including 3 in February 1964. That were among their first appearances in front of an American audience. Their first appearance on February 9th was seen by over 73 million viewers and came to be regarded as a cultural watershed that launched American Beatlemania, as well as the wider British invasion of American pop music, and inspired many young viewers to become rock musicians. The band also made another appearance during their 1965 U.S. tour. Okay.
And remember, this is in the wake of JFK being shot, just a couple months later, and the world is still in complete trauma from that event. And then here comes these 4 dapper young fellows to entertain them and take their mind off it and redirect their consciousness.
Here comes the sun.
So February 16th, after a February 11th concert in Washington, D.C., Washington Coliseum, and 2 February 12th shows in New York's Carnegie Hall, the Beatles flew to Miami Beach on February 13th, where Cassius Clay, later known as Muhammad Ali, was in training for his first title bout with Sonny Liston. On February 18th, the Beatles would eventually pose for publicity photographs with Clay in a boxing gym. Cassius Clay, CC 33. In the boxing gym, the ring, the square, actually a ring, the square. Okay. Or it's actually a square, but they call it a ring. Now, the Beatles held rehearsals on February 14th and 15th. I've got some pictures of those. The band stayed in the Hotel Deauville Deauville, Miami Beach, which was also the broadcast location for the show. The Beatles rehearsed in the hotel's basement. On the evening of the television show, a crush of people nearly prevented the band from making it on stage. A wedge of policemen were needed, and the band began playing She Loves You only seconds after reaching their instruments. Austin, I'll let you tee off on that one in a sec. They continued with This Boy and All My Loving, then returned later to close the show with I Saw Her Standing There, From Me to You, and I Want to Hold Your Hand. The audience for this show was about 70 million, nearly equaling the prior week's performance. Blah, 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 the guitars they played. Lennon played a new Rickenbacker 325 guitar for the show after company executives noticed the poor condition of Lennon's original 325 during the February 9th show and directed that Lennon be given a replacement. This one had the Mossad microphone in it. Lennon continued to use the Miami 325 as his main stage instrument for the rest of the group's tours in 1964 and 1965. Okay, so a show, I guess their second show for Ed Sullivan, was in Miami. And they went down to Miami. They traveled, they fished, they hung out at the beach. Tons and tons and tons of pictures. And this is relevant because John Lennon would be the Beatle who'd spend the most time in Florida. And like I said, this is how the Beatles would end up finally disbanding officially in Florida. So John Lennon must have really liked it here because towards the end of his life, he spent, the final years of his life, a lot of the time in Palm Beach, Florida. So he must have liked it. But also, there is, well, that's it. You guys talk while I pull up some of these pictures, please.
One thing I wanted to say about the Charlie Manson thing before it slips away is how like the whole Manson murders was staged with the Helter Skelter, that writing type stuff. And I don't know if you guys have seen like the Charlie Manson interviews at all, where but I've concluded honestly, for what it's worth, that he was a total like scapegoat, CIA, MK Ultra, like informant type figure.
Patsy.
And he grew up in like the reform, he grew up in jails and reform schools. And if you give any boy like that any type of like care, like time out to run, it's like they're going to take it. They'll do anything. But like he mentions how the Beatles, he was like, the Beatles were teeny boppers. He's like, I'm of the 50s. He's like, Bing Crosby is who I listen to. He's like, I'm 60 years old. He's like, so basically like saying he wouldn't, that the whole Helter Skelter thing was kind of like a staged type image to link with the Beatles and that whole thing. So that was like another reason why they were used in some regards,
Right. And the photos on screen here, guys, most of them, the majority of these are pictures of the Beatles in Florida. That's them at the Ed Sullivan show. You can tell it's the Florida one because their sleeves are rolled up. They look like they're dressed for warm weather. There they are again at the hotel. This is them meeting with Muhammad Ali before he changed his name. But yeah. And what were you saying about the Ed Sullivan show where they were miming their instruments, right? Didn't you say that, Austin?
I didn't, but yeah, they do.
Yeah, it's pretty common today, but when the Beatles did television shows like the Ed Sullivan show, Not all the time. I'm sure they played live too, but they were okay with faking it. And the Beatles helped kind of set the precedent for faking it on the big stage, right? The biggest stages, you need to fake it, right? There's too much at risk, show business, right? If the show's got to go on, we can't have this, we can't have the risk, right? So some artists say, oh, makes total sense. Yeah, just play the track. I'll lip sync, or I'll sing over the instrumental. And if the Beatles took a stand against that, I'm pretty sure they could have helped make that not be the norm. They could have helped keep lip syncing even more of a disgraceful thing. But
I think by that time they'd already sort of signed the Faustian bargain and agreed to be actors, because they went into the studio with songs that were written for them. And a lot of times they didn't even record the instruments. They just recorded the vocal on top. So they already were sort of in the pattern, in the habit of just playing along, being given the script and being like, all right, I don't have to work too hard, do I? So I'm sure they were happy to lip sync.
Did you ever listen to the Searchers?
Mm-mm.
The Searchers are really good. They're like the Beatles with none of the stuff. Okay, they're like the hetero Beatles. They're really good, but something that makes me kind of question or think. One of the singers for the Searchers, who were around at almost the same time as the Beatles, sounds exactly like Paul McCartney. When he's singing, normally you can't tell that much, but when he yells, it sounds just like Paul McCartney. And I always thought that, they were probably just really, really, really trying to sound like Paul McCartney. Now realizing that they had multiple stand-ins in the band, not just for Paul, right? Like Seth was saying, it's not just Paul being replaced. Yeah. Many people know about that conspiracy. On last week or something, we showed a video about Bernard Purdie, legendary drummer, who admits and claimed to the day he died, confessed almost. It was like a confession, like he had to get it off his chest, kind of. He played almost all the drum parts in the Beatles, and if it wasn't him, it was some other studio drummer. That they had, I think he said 4 or 5 drummers in the Beatles playing on different records. Ringo, we talked about this like a week ago too. He's not that good at the drums. He's really not, Yeah, I know that I could play pretty much every single Beatles song on the drums. It's not that hard. And who knows?
Yeah, he admitted.
Who knows?
He admitted it, but just for the record, Bernard Purdie's still alive.
Okay, sorry. I assumed he was dead. Because he's so old.
He's awesome. The Purdie Shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
But for anyone who doubts that the Beatles didn't write all their music or didn't write most of it at all, write out their timeline. Go into Wikipedia and write out the date that they supposedly, wrote and recorded all their albums, and then the day they were released, the days they were on tour, and then listen to them talking about how hard it was for them to write music. And it does not add up. They put out way too many songs in way too short of amount of time.
Yeah.
And people are claiming that Theodore Adorno wrote all the music, but the only thing we're going off is John Coleman's book. And who's to say there weren't 25 songwriters, a whole team? Probably what happened was the songwriters would submit songs to George Martin and Theodore Adorno. Theo was like the behind the scenes guy, and George Martin was the, in front of the console guy. And he had worked for the government. George Martin worked for government broadcasting, and even with Sonic Research and stuff like that. So yeah, I think Theo was one of the big players in that, but they probably had a whole team of songwriters.
Yeah,
you're probably right.
And session musicians.
I think Theo Adorno was more the composer, more like the frequency guy, and because he was all about creating a different scale. Excuse me, a different scale to where it was more like disruptive rather than like harmonious. Like
Yeah,
that
if you
was, like,
look
the
if you
whole
look him
thing,
up,
I guess.
he was known for wanting to disrupt music or something like that. He was known for wanting to introduce like a new atonal system or something like that.
Yeah, atonal. That's what it was.
But I don't know too much about that.
Lots of pictures of the Beatles in Florida. Lots and lots. They went fishing, I guess. Oh, let's go back to this guy. This is someone who we got to tee off on. Brian Epstein. Epstein, right? I was going to say a lot of these pictures are in the Bahamas too, because the Beatles would often go to the Bahamas, or at least early on. And apparently they filmed one of their music videos in the Bahamas. Well, that's John Lennon on the left there.
I thought that was a woman.
The guy on the right, that's Brian Epstein. Epstein. I know everyone's ears just pricked up. Okay. Brian Epstein, apparently no relation, but how many Epsteins are there, involved with British intelligence? Not many. But Brian Epstein was the manager of the Beatles. Let's get his Wikipedia up here. Would you guys got anything to say about Brian Epstein?
Let's get his early life.
Well, Brian Epstein was not that there's anything wrong with this, okay? These are facts. Brian Epstein was a gay Jewish man who was the manager of the Beatles. And we love everybody and support everything no matter what. Free Israel, okay? But we got to notice the noticeable
Epstein in the room.
Clues. Let's address the Epstein in the room. Brian Epstein was the manager of the Beatles. Born September or August died 1967. Born 1934. Was an English music entrepreneur. Nice. Who managed the Beatles from 1961 until his death in 1967. That's right. A mysterious death for him, too. Epstein was born into a family of successful retailers in Liverpool. Retailers. Okay, let's start calling him that. Who put him in charge of their music shop, where he displayed a gift for talent spotting. Talent spotting. Okay. Is that what the kids are calling it nowadays?
Yeah, this is too funny.
Talent spotting.
He's like, oh, he's cute. That's like...
He's like, hello, Mr. Epstein. Like, yeah. That guy's got an eye for talent, I'll tell you. He first met the Beatles in 1961 at a lunchtime concert at Liverpool's Cavern Club, CC. Although he had no experience of artist management, let's get that straight. No experience of artist management. Epstein put them under contract and insisted that they abandon their scruffy image in favor of a new clean-cut style. He also attempted to get the Beatles a recording contract, eventually securing a deal with EMI's Parlophone label.
And it says eventually because they didn't want to sign the Beatles initially. He gave them their demo. He gave EMI the demo, and they were like, what is this trash? They didn't want it. And then I think George Martin got on the phone and said, you might want to reconsider. And then going to the Cavern Club, there's a ghost story. There's like a story, legend in Liverpool that Lucifer came into the Cavern Club one night and basically said, I'm Lucifer. Someone didn't believe him. And he said, oh, if you don't believe in me and if you don't believe in God, surely you don't mind selling your soul. And so the guy said, sure, I'll sell you my soul. And then the Lucifer character sort of vanished. And then the guy basically fell over and died that night. And so that's just one of the stories about the Cavern Club. Also, when they took it down in the 80s, it closed before that, but they demolished it. They found all this occult stuff in there. It was one of the rabbit holes I found while going through this. So yeah, there's probably some dark stuff going on in the Cavern Club where they were all meeting and hanging out.
Wow. That reminds me of a story that I want to summarize first before we get to it. I was talking about the Dancing Elephant bookstore at the beginning of this. Not only are we going to talk about John Lennon's connections to Florida and how the Beatles broke up in Disney World, we're also going to talk about how there's a deep, deep black magic conspiracy behind John Lennon's death, his assassination. Really, really dark stuff. It has a lot to do with this bookstore because when John Lennon needed help regarding the occult, regarding, metaphysical things, this is where he came, this bookstore, and talked to the previous owner, Tamaj Berger, the previous owner. And that's when the store used to be called the Rainbow Bridge. Now it's called the Dancing Elephant. Tamaj wanted us to change it because he didn't want it to be known as an LGBTQ store. That's one of the reasons he wanted us to change it from Rainbow Bridge to Dancing Elephant. Another reason was he heard the Dancing Elephant in a dream. He woke up and said, "That's the new name, Dancing Elephant." But John Lennon used to come in here. And one day, John Lennon came in with a request, a strange request. And Tamaj tried to help him, but kind of ultimately told him, "Dude, I can't help you with that. That is too much. That's too dark for me. We do real religion in this bookstore, not the actual black magic, nasty stuff." And that's what John Lennon came in asking about one time, was real dark black magic. Let's just say life for a life type magic. We'll get to that at the end. That'll be the big reveal at the end, is the Brazilian black magic. Was Brazilian black magic behind the untimely death of John Lennon?
Alleged death.
Okay, good point. Good point. But, all right, Brian Epstein is LGBT and a member of the Epstein family. Epstein's grandfather, Isaac Epstein, was Lithuanian-Brazilian. He arrived in Britain in the 1890s at the age of 18. Okay. You guys get it. Good people all around, only the best. Brian Epstein, let's see, went to a nice school in Kent, blah, blah, blah. Let's go to his personal life. Damn, there's a lot in here. Holy shit. That's a big ass Wikipedia.
Well, the official stories are always really large and a lot of details to sort of confound the story and sort of not make it easy to find out what actually went down.
Now, this is the first one we got to talk about. Shit, I just X'd out of it. Okay. The Beatles' appearance on stage. Remember we were saying they went from real scruffy and greasers to a bunch of goody two-shoes schoolboys? Well, Epstein had no prior experience of artist management, yet he had a strong influence on the band's early dress code, and stage demeanor. They had previously worn blue jeans and leather jackets, and they would stop and start songs when they felt like it, or when an audience member requested a certain song. David Pomeroy, not going to pronounce that, states that when Epstein first saw them at the Cavern Club, he thought they were a scruffy crowd in leather, and they were not very tidy and not very clean. They smoked as they played, and they ate and talked and pretended to hit each other. Epstein encouraged them to wear suits and ties, insisted that they stop swearing, smoking, drinking, or eating on stage, and also suggested the famous synchronized bow at the end of their performances. McCartney was the first to agree with Epstein's suggestions. Oh, you don't say. Now, this is original, Paul. So let's delay judgment on that. But the original Paul was willing to play ball. McCartney was the first to agree with Epstein's suggestions, believing that they reflected Epstein's RADA training. Now, isn't that funny? A gay Jewish guy starts dressing the Beatles like himself and turns them into mega superstars. That's like some RuPaul type shit, okay? This is Brian Epstein. He made the Beatles image. Tells you right there. And Wikipedia is, never going to tell you how deep it really goes. But even what makes it to the surface is enough to go off of, enough to be like, oh, wow, their image was contrived. Their, all this stuff.
Damn, dude. Epstein was just trying to dress him up like his boyfriend that like got away back in the school days.
Yeah.
Like a little British boy.
Quote, I encouraged them at first to get out of the leather jackets and jeans, and I wouldn't allow them to appear in jeans. Boys, you're going to have to... Boys...
Yeah. You got to read it in an English accent.
He gets them in his office. They're coming in. He goes, boys, I want you to strip right now, boys. Okay? We've got work to do. He makes them get butt-ass naked. That's how I see this going. Okay?
Yeah, me too.
I encourage them to get out of the leather jackets and jeans. Even the way he's phrasing that is just weird. Like
he's like, get out of those itchy leather jackets and jeans, and let's get you into some cozy cotton.
He goes, and I wouldn't allow them to appear in jeans after a short time. And then after that step, I got them to wear sweaters on stage. These are 25-year-old they're 25-year-old men we're talking about. Okay.
I got him to wear sweaters. Like it was a project. Sorry.
That's it. Epstein took the group to Whirl, whatever that is, Whirl, to see his friend Master Taylor, of course, his friend, Benno Dorn.
Benno Dorn.
Oh,
he's Polish. Okay.
Who made them their first suits based on a design they had previously seen, which Epstein approved. I thought it was an excellent design at the time. Lennon resisted wearing suits and ties, but later said, I'll wear a suit. I'll wear a bloody balloon if somebody's going to pay me.
There it is, dude.
Yeah.
There.
Hey, never mind.
That's that old Beatles integrity the boomers were always trying to teach us about.
Yeah.
Right?
I'll wear a bloody balloon if somebody's going to pay me.
Epstein began seeking publicity by charming and smarming the newspaper people. That's what we should start calling them, the newspaper people.
It's like, I'll wear a bloody Brazilian carcass.
Wait, speaking of wearing bloody carcasses, I want everyone listening to just Google Yesterday and Today album cover. Not only did it come out June 1966, which is 666, just look it up for yourselves. Look up the Yesterday and Today Beatles album cover and continue.
Is that like the babies, like the decapitated dolls and stuff, dude? So weird.
So they had their suits, their gay ass suits designed by Ben Dover and Benno Dover. Benadorn and blow me. Benadorn to
Benadorn over.
Odin Born.
Yeah.
And okay, so you guys get the idea. Basically, they're willing to dress up like monkeys if they pay them the right price. And then the gigs went up in stature, and though the pay went up only a little bit, it did go up. They were now playing better places. The group was now far more organized, having one single diary in which to record bookings, rather than using whoever's diary was at hand. The group usually called Epstein Mr. Epstein or Brian in interviews, but in private, the group abbreviated his name to Epi, oh God,
Jeffrey?
or
No.
Bree.
Bry?
Bree.
Yeah, I think it's Bry.
No, I think it's Bree, folks. Okay.
True.
Something-
Yeah, that's right. He's
something
gay.
cheesy about this.
Yeah.
Now, what does Bree or Bry, whatever, let's go with Bry. Screw it.
Short for Briss.
Screw it. Exactly,
Fine,
Seth.
let's
You're
do
right.
Bry. Briss.
Yeah, I was saying Bry the whole time, but fine, let's go with no.
No,
Here.
Bree, that's a good point, though. Like, that's probably like
Now,
his
Bree.
tranny name.
They called him Bree or Bry for short. Huh, would that have anything to do with the Yiddish Brit or Bry or Briss? Where where do we I think I bit off more than I can chew with this one. My God.
Just don't order the McRib.
Yeah, guys. Or the Brit Milah or Bris is the ceremony of circumcision in Judaism and Samaritanism, during which the foreskin is surgically removed. That's a nice way to put it. Surgically. According to the book of Genesis, God commanded blah, 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 but the name. Let's get to the etymology. Sometimes you'll hear the word bris pronounced brie. Okay?
Yeah.
Sometimes
French.
you'll hear it
It's
pronounced
like the
brie.
French way, bro. Yeah.
So, who knows? We won't go too far down that gopher hole. We'll leave that one alone. Okay, that one speaks for itself. But
Yeah, I'm here for it.
yeah, Brian Epstein being known as EpiPen, and Bree. Maybe something, maybe nothing. But he helped them get a record contract. There's a whole lot to talk about. We can't go too deep into it. But here's a telegram that Epstein sent to Mercy Beat newspaper in Liverpool to announce that he had secured the Beatles their first record deal. Let's see what else is there. Oh, he's the guy who fired Pete Best, apparently. So there was a fifth Beatle, or the previous drummer. The Beatles enjoyed Starr's drumming style and social demeanor with the band, whereas Best rarely socialized with the other band members after gigs. Yeah, something about him. He just wasn't willing to go down on our manager and wear the suit and dress and talk and walk how everyone told him to. I don't know. There's something about him. Antisocial. But Pete Best, they kicked this guy out of the band. Epstein's task of sacking Best was complicated by the fact that he was under... Dude, for real, man. Did Brian Epstein write this fucking Wikipedia? Well, the Epstein family regularly updates Wikipedia, from what I've heard. But George Martin
from their cells.
Yeah, basically, it was this whole mess. Epstein was the one who had to fire the guy. But yeah, so Brian Epstein guy is pulling all the strings. Well, let's get to this. Sorry, this page is so deep. It's like hard to navigate. His death. I want to find out about his death.
How'd this gay boy die?
Epstein attended a traditional Shiva, week-long mourning period in Judaism in Liverpool after his father died, having just come out of the Priory Clinic where he had been trying to cure his acute insomnia and addiction to amphetamines.
Ooh.
A few days before his death, he made his last visit to a Beatles recording session, Magical Mystery Tour, MM, on 23rd August 1967, at the Chapel, notice the word Apple, recording studios on Maddox Street in Mayfair, London. Epstein asked personal assistant Peter Brown and business partner Jeffrey Ellis to Kingsley Hill for the bank holiday weekend. Approximately 50 miles from his home in Chapel Street, Kingsley Hill was Epstein's country home in Warbleton, East Sussex. After they arrived, Epstein decided to drive back, blah, blah, blah. Epstein phoned Brown at 5 p.m. the next day from his Chapel Street house in London. Brown thought that Epstein sounded very groggy and suggested he take a train back down to the nearest railway station in Uckfield instead of driving under the influence of Tuinol, whatever that is, Tuinol, something. Epstein replied that he would eat something, read his mail, and watch Jukebox Jury before phoning Brown to tell him which train to meet. He never called again. Epstein allegedly died of an overdose of carbitol, a hypnotic preparation combining the barbiturate pentobarbital with carbamol in his locked bedroom on 27th August 1967. He was discovered after his butler, who, having been unable to rouse Epstein via his locked bedroom door, called Epstein's PA, Joanne Peterson. She arrived to rouse him. She arrived, failed to rouse him, and called his doctor, who, with the butler, broke down the door and found Epstein in his bed, appearing to be asleep, an open book near his hand, and some digestive biscuits on the bedside cabinet to soak up all the cum. When they realized
biscuits,
when they realized that he was dead, staff swept the house for contraband and then called the police. Epstein was found on a single bed, dressed in pajamas, not pajamas. Pyjamas.
Wow, that's some old world spelling.
Yeah, it's the British spelling, I guess.
Yeah.
With
like
various correspondence spread over a second single bed. At the statutory inquest, his death was officially ruled an accident caused by a gradual buildup of carbitol combined with alcohol in his system. It was revealed that he had taken 6 pills to sleep, which was probably normal for him, but in combination with alcohol, his tolerance was reduced. The Beatles were on retreat in Bangor, in North Wales at the time, with the Indian guru Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Epstein had previously agreed to travel to Bangor after the August bank holiday. The second of 2 shows by Jimi Hendrix at Epstein's Savile Theater was canceled on the evening of Epstein's death. Okay. Peter Brown wrote in his memoir, blah, 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 that he had once found a suicide note written by Epstein and had spoken with him much about it. According to Brown, the note read in part, quote, "This is all too much and I can't take it anymore." Wow. The Beatles did not attend Epstein's funeral, both to allow his family some privacy, allegedly, and to avoid attracting fans in the media. Huh.
You know, yeah, John Lennon didn't have a funeral either.
Mm-hmm.
And the pills, man. The pills is like, someone I saw in the chat, they said that the pills were popping in the 60s or something like that.
Yeah,
like,
barbiturates were big back then for some reason.
And that's part of the mind control, obviously. I mean, it's like the number one way to get artists hooked and to get them to do stuff, to get them to go crazy, to get them to stay up and perform, and also to implant ideas in their minds.
Definitely. Yeah. Says here, Epstein was upset that he was not honored along with Lennon, McCartney, Harrison, and Starr when they received the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire.
Dude, these awards are so funny that, like, if you, just an aside, like,
yeah,
the people who win these awards, like key actors, and if you go through the list, it's pretty interesting because it's like this little, it's a title. So like the real hit is reject the title, but like Ridley Scott is an MBE. You know, like Sir Michael Caine anyone who's like CERD is
Right.
like OBE or MBE. OBE is the order, which is like higher up, which is like more shady probably, but
Yeah, and it seems like they were all involved in occult orders, and it's really hard to pin down exactly who and what and how and when, but you don't make it into the MBE, without sort of being part of that club. So
Right.
people are asking, were they Freemasons? It's like probably
they're British.
probably, and there's a lot of coding to that. But for me, it's kind of hard to tell. But I would tend to think so.
Yeah.
Dude, what are the odds that there's two Epsteins who are trying to... Okay, I'll just leave it right there. But what are the odds that...
Did they kind of look some... Nah, I was going to say...
Not
like
really.
if this guy was stuck in like a industrial microwave for like 45 seconds, he'd get Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, I think so too. Maybe. But that's Brian Epstein, folks. Look at him plotting right there in the middle. Brian Epstein, the manager for the Beatles, dead of a apparent accidental alleged overdose, 1967. Right, I think that's what we were just reading.
Mm-hmm.
He's thinking about how many digestive biscuits he's going to need in that picture.
That's why their teeth are so bad in England. They just eat digestive biscuits. They only eat. Number one, it doesn't get dark till like 9 o'clock. It doesn't get dark till like 11 o'clock at night. So they all go to sleep at like 4 a.m, stuffed full of digestive biscuits and barbiturates.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
biscuits and barbiturates.
Barbiscuits.
Brian and Jeffrey have a perfect trine in astrology. So maybe not exactly perfect, but September 19th birthday, and then January 20th, which is pretty much 4 months later, which is that's a trine alignment in the zodiac.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Got ritual Epsteins.
So that's kind of one of the first Beatles conspiracies, is their manager, Brian Epstein. Okay. He might have been the guy that got them into the Tavistock program. Maybe they were just a normal band trying to make it big, before he met them. But it's after him that they get a record deal and they become this big thing. And you can even see there, he might have felt like he was getting pushed out, like, hey, these are my band. I brought them to the world stage. Now you're giving them medals and I don't get a medal. What the hell? Interesting. He's dead by 1967. Okay. Not only that, I forgot what I was going to say. Brian Epstein. Go ahead.
He died during the recording of Magical Mystery Tour. And in some of the videos of Magical Mystery Tour, there's like sacrificial imagery. But I think I was seeing it from the perspective of alluding to Paul's death, not Brian's, but it could be either. There's a lot of weird deaths surrounding this band.
And they were definitely sacrificing people, no doubt.
Speaking of sacrificed, hey Sally, don't let the door hit your flappy tits on the way out.
Sally.
Okay.
I didn't catch what she said.
It wasn't.
Who's Sally?
I don't know.
Yeah, like someone like some like virgin they're sacrificing.
I don't know.
Yeah, some like sloppy whore virgin from Britain.
Now, let's get back into Tavistock a little bit, because Brian gets them their deal. He gets them hooked up. But then Brian seemingly gets cut loose, right? Tying up loose ends. I don't know how bad his addiction was, okay? But this really smells to me like, yeah, he wasn't a rock star himself, but being the manager of rock stars, saying, yeah, he was doing these drugs, so no surprise, oh, his dad had just passed away, or he was at a funeral and he was really down that week. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Case closed. It's like the end of Eyes Wide Shut. Stanley Kubrick encapsulates it better than anybody. When Ziegler, in Eyes Wide Shut, he goes, the door was locked. He's like, the door was locked, the window was closed, she OD'd. What is it? He's literally washing his hands clean of the act because the evidence is there. The pieces are in place. Come on, the police are happy, I'm happy, you're happy. Come on, that's it.
He's like, if it wasn't tonight, it would have been another night.
Exactly. Putting a spin on it, setting the stage, right? Oh, the writing was on the wall. Someone said in the comments too, he got Epstein. Yeah, Brian Epstein got Epsteined. They cut him loose. But so that's 1967. Apparently the Paul is dead thing happened 1966. So let's get into that. 1966, Paul is dead. That's the real big Beatles conspiracy that everyone knows about. Paul is dead. I'll pull up the Wikipedia here, but you guys give an overview, whoever wants to.
Well, I think if
talk about it,
I'm just going to mention again, I mentioned this in the beginning, but what's his name? Mike Williams, aka the Sage of Quay. He probably has one of the most intensive studies and the biggest YouTube channel dedicated to this. He hosts a lot of other researchers on his channel. So I would definitely check him out. And then you can't get into this without also reading the memoirs of Billy Shears. So it's a book by Thomas U. Harriot that basically it's written from the perspective of Billy Shears, William Shears, who, allegedly is the actor that replaced Paul McCartney, but it's very convoluted because there were not only a couple actors that played Paul, but Billy Shears also played a couple different people, like Vivian Stanshell and Paul McCartney and some other people. So I haven't even fully wrapped my head around it. It's extremely deep, but what we can tell from the evidence is that even the band was admitting this. People were calling him Billy. People were calling him Fall on tape. It's like you can actually hear George, you can hear all these different people in the band calling him Billy, Beetle Bill, things like that, and Fall, and then the coding in the lyrics. That's a huge rabbit hole in itself. Just reading the lyrics and the messaging they put in the songs. Like, take a Lennon's song, How Do You Sleep at Night? Or even into Revolver is the album that came out in 1966 after Paul allegedly died. And then there's so many death references in Revolver. They talk about death in Taxman, in Eleanor Rigby. Eleanor Rigby is about putting on a face that she keeps in the jar by the door. And then Father Mackenzie wiping the dirt off his hands, that's Father McCartney. And then, I'm Only Sleeping. That kind of rings like the Lazarus and Jesus story where he goes to wake somebody up, but he's dead. And then, Love to You, he says, love me while you can before I'm a dead old man. Here, There, and Everywhere, each one believing that love never dies. Yellow Submarine, we sailed up to the sun. That's kind of a reach. But she said, I know what it's like to be dead. And your bird can sing when your bird is broken. For no one, says her love is dead. Tomorrow never knows it's not dying. That's only from the Revolver album.
Right.
So it goes deep, y'all. We're barely scratching the surface. Let's crack this open, y'all.
Sweet. We'll give the Wikipedia overview here, then we'll tee off on it. Paul is Dead is an urban legend with a link and conspiracy theory with a link alleging that English musician Paul McCartney of the Beatles died in 1966 and was secretly replaced.
Secretly
By,
replaced.
by a lookalike. The rumor began circulating in 1966, gaining broad popularity in September 1969, following reports on American college campuses. According to the theory, McCartney died in a car crash, and to spare the public from grief, the surviving Beatles, aided by Britain's MI5, replaced him with a McCartney lookalike, subsequently communicating the secret through subtle details of their albums. Proponents perceived clues among elements of Beatles songs and cover artwork. Clue hunting proved infectious, and by October 1969 had become an international phenomenon. Rumors declined after Life published an interview with McCartney in November 1969. The phenomenon was the subject of analysis in the fields of sociology, psychology, and communications during the 1970s. McCartney parodied the hoax with the title and cover art of his 1993 live album, Paul is Live. The legend was among 10 of the world's most enduring conspiracy theories, according to Time in 2009. So, damn, this is a pretty big article too. It looks like they might have a lot of the evidence listed in here. Yeah, it looks like a lot in there, but we'll give a rundown. I just want to kind of revise that first paragraph because I think they really steer the narrative for themselves here by outlining their, like almost like they straw man the theory so that they can debunk it very easily. The Paul is dead thing. Number one, they're saying urban legend, whatever. That's their job to label it that. But the narrative they give here, as if there's really only one narrative. There's not just one. There's a lot of narratives piling on this. I'll give you my take and how I kind of rationalize it. Why would they, right? That's what a lot of people are going to think is, why would they do this? Isn't it valuable when a star dies, right? Isn't it, Michael Jackson dies and his music becomes 10 times more valuable, right? The younger you die, the more valuable the music stays, right? Well, I don't know if that was the norm yet. So that would be the first thing I would say is I don't think owning all the rights to someone else's music and then killing them off young to increase the value, I don't think that was a tried and true tested method yet. So that's what I would say as why would they fake it and not just take the death? The death can be profitable too. I'd say I don't think that was a big thing then.
They had a lot more money to make. You know what I mean? They had
they were
years.
fresh. Yeah.
They'd only been out for a couple of years at that point, so they had more records to keep pumping out. They weren't done with the psyop, with the experiment yet.
Yep, good point. A lot more work to do. I'd also say that yes, generally, that's one things that almost all of the theories agree on is that he died in a car crash. Would you say that's fair, Seth? Almost everything I've heard agrees on a car crash.
No, well, yes, until you start looking at Sharon Clemens's book. I think she's got a book called Forbidden Fruit, and she is convinced that Paul died in Seattle in 1966, and they took him off a plane. The plane was supposed to fly from Seattle to California, and the plane was delayed for 5 hours. Like, you can actually look into this very particular case. It's common knowledge that they were supposed to take off at a certain time. It got delayed for 5 hours. And she thinks that was because so they could kind of throw off, people waiting and watching the plane and whisk away Paul and do away with him. So, and she's convinced that he's buried in Seattle. I'm pretty sure. There's a lot of references to the Seattle and the Cascade Mountains in some of their videos. And, I don't really know. I don't know when and how he died or if he died, but he definitely was replaced. And until I heard her stuff, I was pretty much under the impression that it was, he was done in a car. You know what I mean? Why Don't We Do It in the Road? That song. And then a few other songs point to that, but I can't really say. And Memoirs, the book Memoirs of Billy Shears, says that the car accident in London is a cover story. So we know that Memoirs include some fiction to throw people off, because that's part of the magic, is you don't put everything out there. And so, the main conspiracy theory is that he died on September 11th, 1966 in a car crash in London. But Memoirs does say that's a cover story to kind of obfuscate things, throw people off. I would look into Sharon Clemens' work and just take that in as well. So take in as much as you can about this. I have no idea.
True. Well, most of the theories, Seth brings up a couple exceptions, but almost everything I've heard generally points to a car crash. So I'll just leave that sentence alone for right now. That to spare the public from grief. Now, that could have been a driving, reason. I don't think it was the primary reason. I think money is probably the better reason. A lot of money to make. A lot. And then also, I think that the Beatles were already a psychological operation with MI5 guidance. So I think they're kind of getting ahead of the story, or ahead of a little bit of damage control there, by kind of cutting off the narrative early, saying, oh, MI5 came in to help them with it. That's where any potential link between MI5 and the Beatles is, oh, that's just after the Paul is dead stuff. Don't worry about that. That's all Paul is dead conspiracy. Well, if there's MI5 connections before Paul is dead, I'd want to know about it. And I think we do have those connections. So MI5 was involved before Paul's death, alleged death. I want to say that too. And then here's another one. Subsequently communicating this secret through subtle details of their albums. Why? Well, why does Hollywood put breadcrumbs in their movies? Why does Hollywood predict, foreshadow so many things that do happen? Why does Hollywood kind of give us a peek behind the curtain in a fictional way a lot of the times? Because that's how they manufacture consent. That's how they, like the vampire, has to be invited into the home. And by digesting media like this, music, movies, like that, you are subtly, subconsciously inviting the vampire in. You're inviting the vampire in, you're listening to the music, you're eating the fast food, whatever, you're watching the Hollywood, and you're not objecting. You're not objecting out loud. That's a silent consent.
Tacit approval. Yep, it's revelation of the method.
If there's one thing that Dr. Longo cares about, it's consent. Okay?
Understood.
Dr. Consent. Okay? We keep it sexy. We keep it consensual over at the... no, just kidding.
At the Longo household.
The whole consent thing, largely a psyop, but we'll put that.
I also want to add, part of the reason why there's a lot of songs with these clues and breadcrumbs, I think, is because the remaining members wanted to talk about it so badly.
Yes.
Like they may not have signed up for Paul to get offed.
Right.
They signed up to be the actor and kind of do what they're told. But then once their friend, gets taken away, they're like distressed. And I think partially they're just letting steam out, and they're kind of, they're singing about it because they want to sort of troll their handlers and try to speak truth in the face of this like terrible tragedy. But it's also, I think it's more kind of what you're saying.
we'll take a vote. We'll let the people vote and say, do you? And it might differ from Beatle to Beatle. I think that's the case personally. Yep. I think Ringo's the one who was too fucking dumb to know what's going on anyway. You know, all right, guys, we go.
You're just happy to be there.
Are we going in the car today? Okay, yeah, let's go on the car ride.
I guess Ringo, you can sit in the front this time.
Ringo is dumb. Ringo's dumb. He'll do whatever, I think. I don't think he had any backbone or any smarts to begin with. John was a genius, and I think he was a genius. I don't know. I'm not convinced that Paul was a genius. I do think John was. I've seen enough of John in the studio outside of the Beatles to know that he was musical, that he could play, not just the guitar, he could play a couple other instruments and stuff like that. But John Lennon, I think he just really wanted to be a popular musician, really wanted to make songs and, maybe sold out in some ways. I don't love John Lennon, but personally, for me, the sniff test, John Lennon passes the sniff test more than the others. Now, most people go with George. Most people say George was the cool one. George was the quiet one. George was the, I don't know.
What about Billy? Because he's the other guy who's got a say in this and writing some of the lyrics. And he claims that Paul was actually writing through him, that he was embodying Paul's spirit, and that he kind of had a obligation to further his work and further his voice. So I think Billy Shears, the actor who's playing Paul, does want to get some of this truth out there as well. But he was maybe a genius musician in that he was super talented, and he's one of the best actors in the world. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know if you want to make a poll. It's what
well, I was going to say that we'll take a poll and say, we'll go Beatle by Beatle, which one was authentic or not, but the real poll should be, were the Paul is dead messages, were they Paul, the new Paul, fake Paul, right? And the whole MI5, them just putting it in to kind of massage it into our brain, letting us all know, yes, he's dead, but don't worry about it, so kind of like a soft subconscious disclosure. Was it the new Paul joking and mocking and, laughing, right? Was it a confessional? Was it the Beatles trying to tell us in a way that their record label wouldn't notice? Hey, Paul's dead. Paul's dead. Help us. Hey. Or was it just black magic? I'd say that's the fourth option. Was it just an obsession with faking death, faking your own death, and playing things forwards and backwards? Now, this is what I think. There's good evidence to show that the fake Paul was into Aleister Crowley and all the black magic before he got involved with the Beatles. And I don't know the exact details on that, but somebody was using the name Ian Iacamo. Ian Iacamo was a name being used by somebody who was posting newspaper ads saying seeking black magic in the 1960s. I don't know when this started, but it had to be before 1969, right? Someone by the name of Ian Iacamo was posting saying seeking black magic, real black magic, seeking real black magic in a newspaper article.
Yeah, Craigslist then.
And they were putting other ads out for things like that. And then Ian Iacamo would later be credited as a songwriter on a Beatles album. Do you know what song, Seth? I don't remember.
No.
Okay. Let me search Ian Ian Iekimo is a pseudonym Paul McCartney used in 1966. It's supposedly meant to be Paul McCartney phonetically backwards. That's true.
So it's confirmed that he used that as a pseudonym.
Yes.
I
Yes.
didn't know it was actually confirmed. I thought they was just hearsay.
Hang on, it's a song. I gotta. Which song?
Are you gonna go into Ian Iacocmo and Yoko Ono too? Are you?
Paperback Writer.
Mm.
Paperback Writer. Paul. This is official. This is official Beatles. Like canon. Paul wrote his name, signed his name, Ian Iacocmo, on, I guess, original handwritten lyrics of Paperback Writer, but he's credited with writing Paperback Writer. Ian Iacocmo. Ian Iacocmo is Paul McCartney backwards. So you got to say it pretty fast, but it's Paul McCartney backwards. Now, that same Paul McCartney, or that same Ian Iacocmo, was posting before this advertising for things like black magic in the newspaper, saying, if you're into black magic, hit me up. Let's do some stuff together. That's Ian Iacocmo. And much like Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, he was already into people like Aleister Crowley. And Paul McCartney also helped publish like a magazine or like a weekly thing. I don't know what it was, monthly, weekly thing, where it was pretty much like an alternative media, subculture, underground, kind of like youth, experimental, radical, like publication, either weekly or monthly or something. It was like a zine, right? And it would very often cover metaphysical topics. And Aleister Crowley, his poems and big pieces on Aleister Crowley would often be published in this publication that Paul McCartney was involved with. The word Ian Iacocmo was used in those publications as well. So it seems that Paul McCartney, the original or the replacement, I think the replacement, was already into Aleister Crowley stuff. And then he joins in 1966. Now, was it Revolver? Was that the one that came out before Sgt. Pepper?
Yeah, right after his death.
Now, Revolver's good, right? It's okay compared, I'm saying in greatness, not saying it how much I like them. Revolver was pretty out there. There's some out there things, but it's all kind of still under the Beatles umbrella. It's all kind of in keeping with the Beatles repertoire up until then. Sgt. Pepper, which is where we definitely, in our opinion, my opinion, definitely have a new Paul McCartney. The sound completely switches.
Well, their name changes too. They go from the Beatles to just Beatles.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they change their name to Sgt. Pepper and take on a whole new persona, or the Lonely Hearts Club Band. So, and then on the back of the record, there's the four Beatles, and Paul's the only one whose back is turned.
Yeah, there's so much cryptic symbolism. They put so much into that album cover for the symbolism. It's crazy.
Yeah, and Crowley is featured right there in the top left of the album cover too.
Mm-hmm. And real quick, before you go past the Ian Iacocmo, Doctor, I wanted to, I don't know if you guys have heard, like, I don't know if he owned an art studio or was curating like an event at a studio, but apparently Ian Iacocmo had this event where Yoko Ono and John Lennon met. So apparently he low-key like put them together, alluding to Yoko Ono being like some sort of planted, just like succubi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, really quick, Yoko's parents were super connected. I think her mom's side of the family was Japanese aristocracy, like total royalty in Japan, and her dad, I have too many notes here.
It's like a truck driver.
Oh yeah. Her father's side comes from a Japanese banking dynasty.
Damn.
And then her
There
mother's
it is.
side is the, aristocratic Japanese from the former emperor. And she also has an album called Yes, I'm a Witch.
There you have it. Doctor.
And she had an art exhibit. She used to do this like stupid Dada art that didn't make any sense. So it was like an apple on a pedestal. And then apparently it was John went up and took a bite out of it. That's what the story says.
Dadaism.
It pissed her off. So yeah, she's definitely a handler put in there to get him hooked on drugs and sort of control him a little bit. And let me just, while we're still on Yoko real quick, her family moved to Westchester County to Scarsdale, New York, which is the same town that Linda Louise McCartney grew up in.
Ooh.
So there might be some military base in Scarsdale where they were both connected to. But yeah, I didn't actually know about the Yakimo thing and paperback writer. It's interesting. How did Crowley disseminate his writings? Paperbacks,
Yeah.
Yeah, often. Now, I don't know much about the Beatles, but I do know a fair amount about Aleister Crowley. And it is true that the Beatles were into Aleister Crowley. John spoke about it openly. John has spoken about Aleister Crowley on tape multiple times. So there's no denying that John Lennon was influenced by Aleister Crowley. We know that Aleister Crowley's pictured at least once on the album cover of Sgt. Pepper. Let's bring that up.
Oh, and Crowley's featured strongly in the Sean Lennon's music video, the Lennon Claypool Delirium.
Yeah.
They have this incredible song. I forget what it's called. It's got two movements, but if you watch the music video to that, Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley are seriously big themes in that video.
Yeah. Jack Parsons, that boy.
Well,
Edgar
Aleister
Allan
Crowley
Poe is in there.
Yep. Aleister Crowley's top left there, and he's pictured allegedly a second time over he's covered, like half his head is covered somewhere else, but he's the only
Is it
person
behind that yellow dress lady on the right?
No, I don't think so. Aleister Crowley is the only person on Sgt. Pepper album cover pictured twice. So he's once clearly depicted, and then he's a second time covered halfway by someone else. And apparently, this is another part of the whole conspiracy theory. Aleister Crowley died in 1947. In the lyrics to Sgt. Pepper, it goes, "It was 20 years ago today. Sgt. Pepper taught the band to play."
Woo!
Zing.
That was 20 years to the day that Aleister Crowley passed away. Now, isn't that crazy? Now, you can, using a mirror or mirror imaging, all these different words and symbols on the album cover, you can mirror, and they mean something else. So, Lonely Hearts Club Band, if you mirror Lonely Hearts horizontally, you get 111 Roman numeral 9. He die. So 1119, he die. 911, right? 11 and Rome, or 11 and then Roman numeral 9. So 911 or 119, he die. That's what Lonely Hearts says. So here's another thing the Beatles invented. Nonsense lyrics. The blue walrus went to the red bucket.
Yeah.
And then they said, "I love you to the rock and the lizard." That's a fucking Beatles song, okay? the sky is made of marshmallows when I go to school. It's like there's it's so dumb. And people don't question it because it's this whole loosey-goosey, oh, you don't get it, man?
Yeah,
Well,
right.
you just take some more acid, man, then you'll get it. Oh, you don't get what
Like, what are you, retarded?
Yeah.
You don't get it, dude?
It's the emperor's new clothes or the emperor's new suit.
Groove?
What do they call it? No. Well, the emperor's new groove, yeah, but the story about the king who there's a group of gypsies, like scammers, who go into town and they say, "Oh, I have the finest garment ever made. Only those whose eyes are worthy can see it." And so everyone in the town says, the first poor people who see him come into town, they're like, "What is this guy? Hilarious, selling this junk? Who is this guy?" Then the next people who see him hear the story and say, "Oh, they don't see the garment? Well, I see the garment because I have class and my eyes are worthy. I see the garment. I'd like to buy it, actually." He says, No. This is too expensive for you. This is a gift for the king. And the king, because all these people say, yeah, I see the garment. It's beautiful. I'm beautiful. I see it. Don't you see it? Everyone's pretending like they see the garment. Everyone's pretending they can see the invisible thing that doesn't exist. That's not only what happens with so many shitty books, like The Catcher in the Rye and all this stuff, also relevant to the Beatles, The Catcher in the Rye.
Yep.
Reading into things that don't need to be read into. Now, I think the Beatles were distracting us from reading into their lyrics a certain way by this whole smokescreen of nonsense. The blue walrus and the red bucket, like, I don't know, stupid shit like that. Like, that's your typical Beatle lyric. It makes no sense unless your goal is not to make the literal interpretation, to make that you don't care about the literal meaning of the lyrics. If you disregard the literal meaning, as long as they're somewhat grammatically able to go in front of each other, the walrus and the red walrus and the blue bucket or something, as long as that sentence works, you can fit that into a Beatles song. And I think the whole normalizing nonsense, bear with me here, was so that it would be so easy to slip in subliminal messages. You can sing a whole paragraph backwards. And if Paul is dead backwards is cranberry sauce or something like that, or that's a bad example, but let's say,
yeah, we know what you mean.
If the backwards term doesn't fit quite right, like, oh, I want to go outside, flip it backwards, it's, knees down
over Montana,
water bottle, right? Knee down water bottle. The Beatles would just say, okay, let's put knee down water bottle in the fucking song. We'll just force it in. And if the whole band's behind it, nobody's going to question it. That's the normalization of nonsense that the Beatles people give them so much credit for. But
well, I can give you a real example in Sgt. Pepper. So the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band Reprise is a short 1 minute, 18-second track at the end of the record where the chorus just kind of comes back. If you reverse Sgt. Pepper's Lonely, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely, and reverse what they're singing there, what it sounds like is, it was a fake mustache. It was a fake mustache.
Oh yeah, I've heard that one.
It was a fake mustache. Yeah. It was a fake mustache. Now, that wouldn't be weird unless the first Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band LP package came with a fake cardboard cutout mustache.
Yeah.
That you could remove from the package and wear yourself.
Dang, they're just letting everyone be Paul because he's replaced.
Exactly. So that's a really interesting one where that's not called backmasking. That's known as audio anadrome. It's an audio anadrome where a real phrase turned around is another real phrase. Backmasking would be sort of if you like play a guitar solo and then just straight up reverse it and you hear the reversed version, that's backmasking. But this would be an example of an audio anadrome. And, we're talking about it, but Crowley loved the law of reversal and thought there was a lot of magic within that. So maybe you can go deeper into that. Yeah, there's the fake mustache right there.
Yep. And what do you think's with the whole military, like trippy military getup? Why did they switch to military colors? Is that a subtle way of saying, hey, we're military operatives?
For real.
Or
like
is
straight
it
up MI5?
Jimi Hendrix was known to do the same thing. He would wear actual like military fatigues and actual British soldier uniforms. And apparently, it's in the Jimi Hendrix movie. Jimi Hendrix was wearing one of those like old British style like military coats, and some guy told him to take it off. Like, hey, you're disrespecting the military. Who knows?
Or
People,
maybe
people like to forget that Jimi Hendrix got famous in England with the same circles. His manager or his early girlfriend / manager was the wife of one of the animals, right? The House of the Rising Sun.
Yeah, aren't they in the Sgt. Pepper album too? What's that band that's on the bottom left?
I think it's the Beatles twice.
Oh, is it?
I think so, yeah.
And maybe they got Sgt. Pepper and developed this militaristic persona or image from going, all right, what does it sound like to record It Was a Fake Mustache backwards? And then they record it on tape, flip the tape over, play it back, and it's Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that sounds like Sgt. Pepper. Okay,
Yep.
let's be Sgt. Pepper. And and it's like that's kind of how we created our names here on the screen.
I was gonna say,
to
like,
give it
that's
all away.
what we did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Doctor, do you still have the backwards at whatever you were using? Can you see if Ian Giacomo actually does sound like Paul McCartney?
It does.
Because I've never actually tried it, like, personally.
Yeah, I got to go download that app. I mean, I guess, I don't do that stuff. I mean, oh, wait, here it is. Here's the Ian Giacomo. I don't think it'll work that way. I think it'll work the other way, where we say Paul McCartney backwards. It'll sound. But here we go.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's
Paul
way closer than I
McCartney.
thought.
I have to slow it down.
No, that's
Interesting,
it.
though.
I can
'Cause
hear
it's
that
like,
for sure.
without any P's or anything in Ian Giacomo, like, you wouldn't think it would sound like, but it does. It's bizarre.
Paul McCartney.
Dude,
Giacomo.
it's there. It's there.
Yeah, if I got the rhythm right, it would be right. But
It's sick, dude.
Paul McCartney.
This is,
Yeah, it's
what's his app called?
Do
bro?
it quick. Say,
Ian Giacomo.
There we go.
McCartney.
Here, let me say it another way. Ian Giacomo. I'm not doing it right, but if
You gotta do it with a British accent.
Oh, that's what it is. There, you got
Paul
Paul
McCartney.
Paul
Paul
McCartney.
McCartney.
Oh,
Yep,
there it is.
There it is.
Nice snag, Elliot.
And so you can hear a lot of reversals in the Beatles music. The song "I'm Only Sleeping," "Rain," "Taxman," "Tomorrow Never Knows," Sgt. Pepper's Reprise, Revolution 9, "Free as a Bird," which came out much later.
You gonna include the best one?
Well, because is a reversal of the Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The story goes, Yoko was practicing Moonlight Sonata on the piano, and Paul McCartney or John suggested, I wonder what that sounds like backwards, and challenge her to play it backwards. So the chords of some movement in Moonlight Sonata reversed became that song Because, which I think is a really beautiful song.
Coincidence theorist with the 199. He says D hysteria and passing out was from beat hole mania. So I guess he's cluing us in on the Beatles were not the beat holes. They might have been the bee holes.
The Beatles.
The beat hole. Hey, Brian, mate, have you got any good names for the band? Yeah.
Yeah, the Beatles.
The Beatles, yeah. We should bring up that too, since we're on the Crowley subject. Crowley he did a little beat holing, to say the least, okay? But Aleister Crowley wrote a poem called The Winged Beetle. The Winged Beetle. Beetle spelt normally. But when the Beatles decided to come up with a name, weren't they known as like the Papermen before or something like that?
There was a bunch of dumb names.
But they're like the Papermen, almost like the mass media. Like we're giving you the media.
The propagandists.
Like we're giving you the news.
The Quarrymen.
The Quarrymen. Quarrymen. Q.
Chiseling
Capital Q.
away at the quarries.
And then also, John suggested they were the Beatles, spelling it Beatals, which is an anagram for BAAL, ball, set, to occult demigods.
Now,
nothing.
The Beatles being known as the Beatles, there's a pun in there, like a beat, like you're on the drum beat. But it's also a veiled reference to Aleister Crowley's Winged Beetle. Now, how do we know that for sure? Because when the Beatles break up and Paul goes on his own, he's solo for a little bit. Then he starts the band Wings. Wings. Winged Beetle. Direct reference to Aleister Crowley. And then we have Aleister Crowley on Sgt. Pepper. And Sgt. Pepper is when they start playing all the backwards stuff. Now, my favorite. Okay, yeah, sorry, you're right. My favorite backwards Beatles song, and I think my favorite Beatles song, it's not even really a Beatles song. It's almost a George Harrison solo project. Blue Jay Way.
Fire song.
Operation Mockingbird. Blue Jay. But also Operation Bluebird, I think, which is like the Jason Bourne. In the Jason Bourne movie, they call it Operation Bluebird. But I think there is a real Operation Bluebird, too.
Well, also, according to Sharon Clemens' work, John wrote that in Laurel Canyon, in that neighborhood, the day after Paul disappeared. And so they all made it back to California from Seattle. And, this is the story of him waiting for Paul. There's a fog upon LA. My friends have lost their way. We'll be over soon, they said.
Yeah.
Now they've lost themselves instead. Please don't be long. Please don't be very long. Please don't be long.
And the tone of that song is nothing like any other Beatles song. It's not
very gloomy, very melancholic. Yeah.
Not like any other song I've ever heard by anybody. It's almost like the backwards message was so important that they kind of rushed it to publication. Like you can't even dance or sing along to that song, really. It's good. I love that song. But the raw emotion, too. I'm not a big emotion guy, okay? But you can almost feel George Harrison begging for help in that song. I do think that George, I kind of was hard on him earlier, but I think he woke up and wanted out and really felt the weight of his conscience.
That's what I'm saying.
Bearing down on him. Blue Jay Way, I think, was more of a confessional. Now, it's hard to make sense of that in a whole album full of Aleister Crowley, butt magic, psyop, warlock,
It's hard to pick through the butt magic.
But I think that Aleister Crowley, whatever.
Wait. So that music video, that Blue Jay Way music video is pretty revealing too. They sacrifice a cello in that music video. The cello is a bass clef instrument. So Paul was the bass player. You know what I mean? And they burn a cello with that instrument. Now it gets deeper. There's a connection to Crowley. When there's a scene where John is playing the cello and he's wearing this big sunflower. And now I don't know if this is a connection, but I heard one of the Paul is Dead researchers mention this, that the sunflower calls upon the sun card from the Crowley Thoth deck.
Yeah.
And the sun card corresponds with the Hebrew letter resh, which means front of the head. It means the face. So was Billy wearing a Paul mask? Were they calling upon that with the music video, with the sunflower, with the burning of the cello?
Eleanor Rigby, like you said, take your face off, you know.
Yep. Keeping a face in a jar by the door. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, who likes artichoke, folks? Okay.
I do.
Let's just cut through all the noise for a sec here. Okay.
To the heart of it.
Who likes artichokes? Project Artichoke. Project Artichoke, also referred to as Operation Artichoke, was a project developed and enacted by the United States Central Intelligence Agency for the purpose of researching methods of interrogation. Project Artichoke was succeeded by Project MKUltra, which began in 1953. Initially known as Project Bluebird, that's where the Bluebird comes from. And then when you see the Jason Bourne movies, they're not just making shit up out of thin air. I mean, it's also like a soft disclosure, you know, manufacturing consent. Also, the Manchurian Candidate, you know, goes into this a little bit too. But Project Bluebird, not a fictional thing, real thing. A lot of people know about Mockingbird. Bluebird was real too. Bluebird is mentioned in Bluebird is heavily referenced in Back to the Future. Bluebird. But the song we were talking about was Blue Jay Way. Blue Jay Way is like project, you know, to project is to go forward, right? To emanate, right? Blue Jay Way. Project Bluebird. Same thing to me. Okay. Same thing to me. It's
the way of the project Bluebird.
And also, if there's one Beatles song that's meant to be listened to on LSD, it's Blue Jay Way. And here we have LSD experiments being a big part of the Project Bluebird umbrella.
And there's a lot of bird references in the Beatles songs. Blackbird, and Your Bird Can Sing.
Good point.
Even Norwegian Wood and Free as a Bird. And
Yeah, Bird is big in MKUltra programming, like the famous picture of Audrey Hepburn or whatever. Catherine Hepburn? What's her fucking
Audrey,
name?
I think. Aubrey or Audrey?
Yeah, I don't know. But where she's at that like Rothschild Eyes Wide Shut party and she's wearing the bird cage as like part of the costume. Basically like her head is the bird in the bird cage. So she is like basically an MKUltra sex slave ready to party.
Space Ghost 444 with the $5 says there's a Paul McCartney song called So Bad where Ringo poses in the Hanged Man and also does the rolled up pant leg too. Hanged Man is at 142. Okay, good
Check
to know.
that out.
And then John Supp with $5. If John Lennon's wife married the lead singer of U2, her name would be Yoko Ono Bono.
Someone commented earlier too that it said Dr. Longo, not big on emotions, not big on consent.
I know.
You saw that?
I put that one up on screen.
Okay. Those are the only ones I can see, by the way, is the ones you put up.
Oh, really?
I do you guys go on the actual stream and like look at the comments at the
Do you
So
same
you
see
can
the-
click comments in StreamYard.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, I see it right here. Okay, problem solved.
Don't look at them though. Don't look at them though. They're tearing you to shreds right now.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
Yeah, birds also, they sing, and they tweet, and they're like message givers and message bringers. I think you touched on this in the Ace Ventura episode. They deliver messages, and that's what the lyrics are doing. They're revealing truths about Paul, about lots of things. And so I think that's where the bird messaging comes from, or what it kind of means is to tweet, to deliver messages.
Yep. Also to mimic. That's the mockingbird element is, I don't know what the symbolism of blue jay is, but I know mockingbird is, of course, mimicking, doing what you're told. If parroting, if someone says something to you, you can say it back. The mockingbird, much like a parrot, they can't talk as good as a parrot, but they can mimic human sounds, and they can mimic almost every sound they hear. So if you click your your car beep to lock it, and it beeps, you'll hear mockingbirds mimicking that. Mockingbirds are very, very, that's what they do. They mock. So they can replicate almost every bird around them. They can mimic the noise. So you can kind of see the esoteric symbolism right behind that animal. But Project Bluebird, Blue Jay Way.
Dude, Blackbird's got some dark lyrics too. It's like such a beautiful melody and beautiful song.
Yeah.
But Blackbird singing in the dead of night. What birds sing in the dead of night? And then take these broken wings and learn to fly. I guess, birds might sing but like in the dead of night. So there's like a death reference right in the very first line. Take these broken wings, learn to fly. Take these sunken eyes. Take these sunken eyes, learn to see. It's coded. I can see him coding something in there.
Yeah. Also, Paul liked to play on his name with Paul. And, John Lennon infamously made the comment that the Beatles meant more to kids than Jesus did. And that caused a boycott of the Beatles albums in not only America, but, different parts of the world. And John saying we meant more than Jesus did. Paul would often play on the fact that his name, Paul, was the same as Saint Paul, the Apostle Paul, right? That Paul, Paul, hate to say it, but Paul was kind of the bad actor, one of the bad actors in Christianity. There's a lot good to say about him, but there's some bad to say about him too. And Paul would also, there was a John in the band, and there was John that preceded Jesus. That John had his head chopped off. And we see that the decapitation would become a theme with the Beatles too. It's alleged that when Paul got in this car accident, that his head was decapitated. That's what is commonly told in the Paul is dead, narrative. Seth might have a differing perspective from that lady who wrote that one book, but from everything I've heard, it's usually Paul died in a car crash, and his head got chopped off at the same time. So decapitation being a thing.
Can we talk more about Crowley?
Totally, yeah.
So, did you ever look into this? The Help album cover?
No.
Because they're doing like the air traffic controller signs, but so people think that. People think it's like a sign language or air traffic controllers spelling the word help, but it's not. I haven't verified this, but some researcher says that what they're doing is they're showing OTO grade signs.
They are. It's true. Yeah. I've read-
Osiris slain, Isis mourning, Apophis, and Osiris rising.
Yep.
And so it's just total, OTO magic on the album cover.
Yep, that's true. It's true. This is Aleister Crowley. When we search that, it has nothing to do with the Beatles. You can see the poses. Right. He published these in one of his books. But yeah, that's Aleister Crowley showing, yoga poses, magical poses to the reader, right? Now, it just so happens, like Seth said, the Beatles, in some of their photo shoots, not just this one, they would use his symbol. Oh, look at that. Is that Jimmy Savile?
We got to mention him.
Oh, God.
Yeah,
and apparently Brian Epstein, remember his dad passed away before he passed away? That was at the Jimmy Savile Hospital that Brian Epstein was visiting before he himself passed away. At Jimmy Savile Hospital, I believe. But this is the poses Seth's talking about. It's true. Not a conspiracy theory. This is the Beatles.
Look at that shit.
On their album cover. This is the Beatles. This is Aleister Crowley's how-to guide for magical poses.
And they're even wearing like flowing clothing, kind of like the cloak Crowley's wearing in his own book.
Yeah. True. True. So Aleister Crowley, he also said, read and write backwards. Now, let's see which source for that was.
That's the Book of the Law, right?
Yeah. So like I was saying earlier, Paul McCartney was infatuated with Aleister Crowley. John Lennon was also a little bit interested. I have never heard George and Ringo talk about it, but John definitely did out loud in the public. He was open about being into Aleister Crowley. And Paul was open about backmasking or recording things forwards and backwards. So I think Paul was the leading force behind the backmasking. But John was also into Aleister Crowley. So let's read this a little bit. Aleister Crowley, in his occult book, Magic, Book 4, suggests training oneself to think backwards by listening to reversed records. We'll just read it from the source. Hermetic. Here, talk, guys. Sorry, let me pull this up.
Well, so someone mentioned Jimmy Savile. I've seen a few people commenting, you got to talk about Jimmy Savile. You couldn't be in the UK music scene without bumping shoulders with this guy because he was like a DJ and he introduced a lot of concerts and he was just super connected in the UK scene. But he toured with the Beatles. Apparently when the Beatles toured the UK, he would be with them on the tour bus and then introduce the band at the show. So they were very tight with him. If you don't know Jimmy Savile, he was one of the worst PDF files in history, just a total monster. But he was at the top of society, the best friends with the Queen and all this stuff. So I just had to kind of address that. People are talking about him and his association with the Beatles. Total scumbag.
Yeah, Aleister Crowley in one of his books openly recommends, almost like commands, says, learn to read backwards, write backwards, walk backwards, talk backwards, if it be convenient, to constantly watch reversed television, movies, listen to reversed music. He said to make a normal practice of it. And he believed that by spending time contemplating things as they go backwards, you would kind of cue yourself in to the flow of time. You would start to understand the flow of time in a way, or you would start to resist the flow of time, or recognize the, that time is fake, something along those lines, that you're kind of unwinding the fabric of reality to kind of better understand it a little. Or, you can kind of interpret it as he's saying you'll gain power by doing this. You'll gain influence, He really does kind of write in a tempting way, like, hey, if you just dedicate 6 months to this stuff, you'll get everything you want. That's kind of how he poses a lot of that. But yeah, so the Beatles do that. When we hear all those backwards things, when we see Aleister Crowley on the album cover, there's no denying this. Paul admits to writing backwards. John Lennon admits to being a fan of Aleister Crowley. Put two and two together. There's no denying it.
Yeah, Paul was a lefty too. And so that sort of means that Billy Shears had to learn how to play guitar left-handed. And so I'm sure the reversal principle came in handy for him. But there's an interview I heard with Paul McCartney. The reporter was asking him, about being left-handed and kind of how did he discover it, And Paul was like, he basically said, well, one day I was writing my name left-handed and I ended up writing it mirror, like not just writing my name left-handed, but actually writing it backwards, mirror image. And then he looks at the camera and he's like, I wonder what that says about me. Ha ha ha. Kind of like joking about it, but it's like, wink. Yeah, clearly, openly practicing this type of,
yeah, like anybody accidentally does that ever.
Nice ads, dude.
Team Obes.
Yeah. Broke boy.
Yeah, why don't you get YouTube Premium, bro?
Don't get high on your own supply, baby. You want me to squeeze? You want me to squeeze? You want me to roll the tube up so you can get all the U out of it that you need? Roll that little
roll it up.
Toothpaste tube up. Squeeze all that U out of there.
Yep.
Now, guys, this is rare footage of a concert that John Lennon did after the Beatles, where, of course, Yoko's fucking on stage being a twat. And go watch Yoko Ono ruining John Lennon's concert with, who was it? Not Little Richard. It was the farting on hookers one. Who's that?
Rick James?
No.
Lionel Richie?
No.
I've hit all the ones
Lionel
that are
Richie.
like the.
Come on, in the chat. Come on, chat. Help us out. Who's the Chuck Berry? Thank you.
Oh, Ubu Khan.
Chuck Berry.
Thank you.
You guys know about this? Farting on hookers?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so John Lennon's favorite, apparently his favorite musician was what's that guy's name? I already forgot. Chuck Berry.
Buck Cherry.
And Chuck Berry would, he kept playing. He was a little older than the Beatles. But when John Lennon and the Beatles become famous, John Lennon's got some street cred. Him and Chuck Berry start hanging out. And I guess Chuck Berry and John Lennon were playing a show together. Yoko, being the witch that she is, and I think her and Paul were in cahoots to start off. Yoko, being the black magic witch that she is like a succubus stuck to John Lennon, clinging to him, never went anywhere without her, it seemed like. And oh my God, dude, she had the nastiest tits in the world, dude. Fucking just like, she is just shaped like a fucking mini fridge, okay?
Ugh.
She's not good looking. Her hair is frizzy, looks like a fucking witch's broom. Her face is ugly. Doesn't even look like a cute Japanese girl.
She looks like a bar of soap that you like. You
Bro.
know when you kind of get some chunks out of it by accident and like drop it a few times, and it's got all the dents in it. That's kind of like what I'm seeing here.
She's got tits like burlap potato bags. Okay, that go
Some
down.
like
to
that,
her.
doctor.
Ugh,
I don't
dude,
know.
and they're like so wide and flat. She's got those pancake titties. It's nasty, ugly, ugly. To think that he was why am I saying that? To think that he was falling for her beauty. She was no Linda McCartney, folks. Okay,
Mm-mm.
she was not far from a 10 out of 10.
He was in it for her brain.
Those white guys with Asian fetishes, they can't beat that shit. Okay, they suffer that lifelong. I had a friend from high school who was with Asian chicks. He really liked Asian chicks. You remember this? I'm not going to say his name, Austin. You know.
No, I'm laughing at someone in the chat said moons over titties, like moon over Montana. Some of these are funny.
Now,
but which you were talking about an Asian back in the day?
Remember the kid we went to high school with who only dated Asian girls?
Yes.
And then he got it. Who used to sell us weed?
He married an Asian.
Married an Asian.
Yeah.
He was dating an Asian in school. Breaks up in high school. Graduates high school. Breaks up with her. Gets another Asian girlfriend. This kid's like blonde, like just normal blonde white guy. Breaks up with the Asian girlfriend. Gets another Asian girlfriend. Married to that Asian girlfriend. I don't know if this poor guy's never been with a white chick. I don't know.
He was with the only other one was like a Latina. I think I've known this boy a while. Just a brief, like what I think is like he tried white biddies, realized they were crazy, and like got rejected by a white girl or two. Right. Then he went Latina. That's how he started, and then that ended up pretty bad. And then he just went Asian once, and he was like, "Oh shit!" And he's like 6'4", 6'3", something like that.
Yeah.
So I think it was purely because they're smaller, and it was like he can just flip those things around and whatnot.
Yeah.
But
are you saying Lennon was into her because of her magical abilities?
Listen, she could probably
sucky, fucky, long time.
Exactly. She can probably Kundalini snake around that boy.
She was the only chick eating ass in the 60s.
For sure, dude. Because they're doing that in Imperial Japan, so it's like she brings that over here.
Yeah. All right, enough of that. Enough of this bitch. Tee off on this bit. But okay, so she's ruining his life, whatever, okay? When John goes to play a show with Chuck Berry, apparently Yoko demands to be on stage. And now this could not have been John Lennon's idea. So you got John Lennon's playing with Chuck Berry. Yoko Ono's on stage for some reason. Halfway through the song, Yoko Ono is apparently like upset that no one's paying attention to her or something. She grabs a microphone and goes,
yeah,
and screams.
Dude, like she just looks evil. Like, dude. Like she just woke up like 30 seconds ago from like a terrible nightmare. And that's just like how she is all the time.
And dude, John looks at her like, what the fuck? And Chuck Berry just keeps singing. He's like, man, you didn't. I'm not gonna
say it. Say it. I know exactly what you're gonna say.
He's like, man, I'll show you how to keep that bitch in line. If you, he's like, you ever need some tips with the females? You tell me. Chuck Berry will set them straight.
He's like, you got a fart on her.
Now, John Lennon maybe didn't have the best taste in women because his idol, Chuck Berry, he had a way with women, we'll say, but Chuck Berry was like arrested in like the 80s or something. They like SWAT teamed his house. It was over some dumb shit. Okay, guys, go look this up for yourselves. We're going to have to do a Chuck Berry video sometime soon or something. They raid his house for some dumb shit. You know what they find in Chuck Berry's house? They find like hundreds of recordings, video recordings of him hiring hookers, doing drugs with the hookers, banging their brains out, pissing on them. Okay.
Farting on them.
No, hang on. No, that's where we draw the line, Austin.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
My bad, boys.
everything up until then is fair play, okay? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But when you, Chuck Berry, rock and roll icon, I don't know if it's just because you banged every chick there is, there's nothing left to do or what. But dude, Chuck Berry, his thing was putting hookers in a bathtub and farting on them on camera. And someone's holding the camera. It's not a tripod.
It's like his son. His son is just forced to videotape it.
Now, you guys might think after a long night of smoking a little pod and being, being goofy up here that we're making that up. That's the most rock solid part of this whole video is that we know
don't make anything up.
Chuck Berry did that. That's on tape. Okay. If there's one thing to take away from this video, that's the true one. And that's Chuck Berry.
You can take that one to your mama, okay?
So
you can take that to Regan and his horse.
And dude, the videos are fucking hilarious. If you watch them, the audio is too dude,
Nice.
Oh my god.
I've
Dude,
heard.
I'm crying.
Yeah, it's really fun.
All right, guys, grow up. I remember my first night out with the ladies. Come on. Nothing out of the normal. But so, all right, Chuck Berry, John Lennon, whatever. I bring that up because we're watching a video now where Yoko Ono kind of almost does something similar. It's John Lennon in like the 70s, a little bit later, a little bit older. And he's on stage with Frank Zappa. Now that's interesting because Frank Zappa had taken stabs at the Beatles before, and the Beatles had kind of taken some stabs at him in the press. They had a mutual respect, no doubt. But they would take stabs at each other, right? Because the Beatles were like trying really hard to be goofy and trippy, right? All this CIA money. Well, Frank Zappa is not all that different. He's got all the Laurel Canyon money behind him, right?
Yeah, his dad was like a chemical warfare engineer.
But the Beatles didn't like that Frank Zappa was so effortless with his trippiness and talented. He didn't have to try really hard. Like that's just what oozed out of him, maybe. The Beatles had to try really hard to be trippy, and it was all very contrived, right? Well, later on, like I said, they had respect for each other. John Lennon ends up playing a show with, what's his name? Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa later reflected on that show. And you can go watch some of it here. There's this recording. But John Lennon, you can hear Frank Zappa tell a story about John Lennon. By the end of his life, Frank Zappa didn't have too much nice to say about John Lennon and the Beatles. Based off this experience, he was giving John Lennon a good chance, right? John Lennon goes up on stage. I think they're playing with Zappa's band. So John Lennon and Yoko are kind of like guests of honor. Well, John had the idea, hey, let's record this show like professionally and do something with it. Lennon and Zappa, that's really cool. Well, they tape it, they film it, and then the show's over, and apparently Zappa doesn't hear anything. Doesn't, almost like they stopped talking to him. And go listen to the story himself. He tells it better than me. Zappa says that John Lennon pretty much ghosted him and took the recording and took the footage and made something with it and did all this weird shit to it. They put in fake audience noises. They did all these things. They rearranged it, and Frank Zappa says they did things that make no sense. They did things that make no sense. We had a good audience that night. Like there was. Sometimes you want a nice, clean audience sound, so that's understandable. But it escapes my memory. Frank Zappa said they did some weird stuff to that recording for no reason. So much so that he lost trust in John Lennon. And granted, this is John Lennon and Yoko Ono, but still, it rubbed Frank Zappa the wrong way. And Frank Zappa would put up with a lot of nonsense. But that's one thing. That's one story about Frank Zappa and John Lennon. Then we have the Purdy thing. Then we have Bernard Purdy talking about how Ringo wasn't playing the drums on any of the recorded Beatles songs. But who knows? So Frank Zappa, he's in with that whole Laurel Canyon crew. But people go listen to that Frank Zappa complaining about John Lennon. That's what this picture is right here. This is them up on stage together. John Lennon and Frank Zappa. Zappa's over to the right. But apparently they never released it, or they never fully released it. And it always bothered Frank. He thought it was going to be something really cool. It ended up being something really ugly. And he felt like he got wronged, basically. I forget what it really was that offended him, but he just didn't like it. So let's try and connect this to Florida now. 1967. Fast forward a couple of years. 1971, 1972 is when the Dancing Elephant bookstore opened. It was called the Rainbow Bridge back then. The Rainbow Bridge opened by Tamás, a Hungarian immigrant who escaped communism in Hungary, came to America with like no money, basically started from scratch, met some people, got into the right things, and started up the bookstore. Now, the bookstore's always been around Palm Beach County. I'm gonna mute you, Seth. The bookstore's always been around Palm Beach County, Florida. And right now it's in Lake Worth Beach. Now, like I was saying, the Beatles broke up in Florida. So, we'll tell that story first, because that sets up the Rainbow Bridge story.
Cheers.
1 second.
Damn. You guys should do some ASMR orange juice.
Is that orange juice? I'm not looking at the screen.
Yeah, boy.
Let's look at this. So just to start off, the Beatles were heavily influenced by Disney cartoons. Part of their vision for cartoon music videos and cartoon, DVD, or not DVD, but like movie releases and things like that, was because they were into Disney. They liked Disney, right? They liked the Disney cartoons. This day in Florida history: John Lennon, Disney, and the end of the Beatles, a Florida story. We see John Lennon there in his Mickey Mouse shirt.
Oh, how cute.
It was December 29th, 1974, and a seemingly ordinary day at Disney's Polynesian Village resort in Florida. A seemingly ordinary day at Disney Polynesian Village Resort in Florida turned into a moment of music history. With a view of the Magic Kingdom and Cinderella Castle in the distance, John Lennon picked up a pen and signed the papers that officially dissolved the Beatles. What better backdrop for one of the saddest yet most significant moments in rock and roll history than the, quote, happiest place on earth? The long and winding road to breakup, blah, blah, blah. The missing Beatle. Lennon lived within walking distance of the Plaza Hotel. But when Harrison's lawyer called to ask why he wasn't there, Lennon reportedly shouted, "The stars aren't right." It was a cryptic response, reflecting Lennon's fascination with astrology at the time. His refusal to attend left the group and their legal teams frustrated. Instead of joining his former bandmates, Lennon chose to spend the holidays with his son Julian and his companion, May Pang, in Florida. This period, dubbed the Lost Weekend, was an 18-month separation from Yoko Ono, during which Lennon explored life apart from his tumultuous marriage. Pang, Lennon's assistant turned girlfriend, had Yoko's blessing when the relationship began in 1973. Interesting. I didn't know they were doing some weird polyamory. That's why they were staying, I guess, at the Polynesian, Disney's polyamorous resort. Okay. The Polynesian, get on your knees and get poly.
Yeah, then Yoko got all jealous and then I think killed that bitch. I don't know.
Lennon and his entourage stayed at the Palm Beach condominium of music executive Morris Mo Levy, known for his alleged mob ties and controversial dealings in the music industry. Levy was a colorful character who offered his luxurious residence for the holiday retreat. He joined Lennon, Pang, and Julian with his son Adam for a sunny Florida Christmas. Their days were filled with walks on the beach, lounging by the pool, and even some mischievous fun, Brian Epstein style.
Yeah.
Like throwing firecrackers at palm trees. But the highlight of their Florida adventure came with a visit to Walt Disney World. Disney World was still relatively new in 1974, with the Magic Kingdom as its sole park. Lennon and his family stayed at the Polynesian Village Resort, a tropical-themed hotel known for its proximity to the park and its iconic monorail. The monorail even stopped inside the hotel. I've been there, I've stayed there, offering guests a seamless way to travel to the Magic Kingdom. Blah, 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 blah.
Also, Magic Kingdom.
Yep.
Magical Mystery Tour.
Yep.
Aleister Crowley. Black Magic. I'm a witch.
Possibly the first photo of ex-Beatle John Lennon and monorail operator Harold East. Right there. There we go, the final signature. As the holiday continued, John Lennon was finally tracked down by an Apple court lawyer, determined to get the dissolution papers signed. On December 29th, inside a room at the Polynesian Samoa Longhouse, Lennon signed the documents that formally ended the Beatles. The room, with its view of the Seven Seas Lagoon and Cinderella Castle, CC, provided a serene backdrop for this monumental moment. Interesting. Personal lawyer Harold Sater. Okay. Moses Levy. Beatles and Disney. While the Beatles and Disney never collaborated directly, there are interesting overlaps. The Vultures in Disney's The Jungle Book were based on the Fab Four, and Disney later purchased the rights to Peter Jackson's docuseries, The Beatles Get Back. The series offered an intimate look at the band's final years, streaming on Disney+. Though Disney won't confirm the exact room where Lennon signed the papers, Beatles fans believe room 1601 is the spot. Today, the room is a pilgrimage site for fans who want to stay where the Beatles' long and winding road came to an end. All right. So the Beatles break up in Florida. I didn't know that part about Yoko giving John some freedom to go date some other chick or whatever, but who knows? Couldn't have been good for the family. Now he's already got Julian, who he had with the white chick, previous wife. But this is where we get to the story. And I'm going to puff on this a little bit. So if you guys want to like talk in summary or bring up any key points, this will be like the final story after that. But give me a couple. Yeah.
We got to talk about Lennon's death too, because that's sketchy. Okay,
that's it. That's where my story kind of ends.
Cool. And then, so I guess before we get there, there's one detail I don't want to forget to mention, which about Paul, which is that the real Paul got a couple girls pregnant, and one of them eventually wanted to get a paternity test and verify that Paul was the father, because she knew he was, she wanted royalty, she wanted money.
Hell yeah. They
took the paternity test, and the test didn't show anything, because it was, at that point, it was Billy Shears who took the test. Clearly, they're not the same person.
Deceased semen.
They're not the same person, so they don't have the same blood. So the court eventually threw it out.
Wow. I was wondering about. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they dropped the case. They cleared it, and the test didn't show anything. So I mean, that's like genetic evidence for Paul being replaced. You know, people can look at the face and the lyrics all they want, but it's like when you actually test their blood.
Dude, MI5 looking at MI5 sent in like a vial of donkey jizz to be analyzed. And
checks out.
Yeah, ram cum actually.
Yeah.
For real.
Seth, have you looked in at all, like anybody, because like if Paul is not the original Paul, and I mean, I'm not like, after a certain amount of time, people probably stop asking as many questions about it, but like, are there any people that come out saying that like, yeah, this guy's been a fake and I've been paid to like shut up, or like, I wonder how hard it is to like
not
keep
that
people
explicitly
silent.
Can I butt in?
Yeah.
I'd say that the most explicit kind of tell-all confessional comes from, I think her name's Linda McCartney, Paul's wife, who gives a very damning TV interview at some point close to in like the 80s or 90s or something. She gives an interview where she says, someone very close to me. We'll watch it. I think we can watch it.
Yeah, I'm down.
To someone very close to me, hurt me more than you can ever know, like betrayed me in a way that I can never explain. And if anything ever happens to me, there's a letter explaining everything. She says this with her own mouth.
Well, dang.
Camera. We'll watch that one in a sec.
I'm down. And one other thing I just wanted to say real quick, and that's probably like the end of like things I had on my mind about this stuff, but how the Rolling Stones and how the Beatles were less of like they were very soft and like the more hippie version of the British invasion, and like the Rolling Stones were supposed to be like the bad boys. So like I guess part of their roles were like, you know, Rolling Stones being like, yeah, and like the tongues, all mocking tongue logo is their kind of like main logo. They're kind of like the fuck you, and then the Beatles are the I love you, you know.
It's almost like they represent the black and the white checkerboard floor, two polarity opposites.
True.
And the Beatles were selling pills and acid. The Rolling Stones were selling heroin.
That's true.
They were the hard drug band. The Beatles were the soft drug band.
True.
Yeah.
And then as far as like people revealing the truth overtly, it does happen. Like, but it's almost coded, or it's almost so quick that you don't even notice it. There's a couple public quotes where George Harrison has said, we all loved Paul very much in past tense. He says he calls him Fall numerous times. I've seen at least 2 clips of that. And then there's a video of them at a cafe sitting around like a diner counter. And he looks at Paul and he goes, "See Beetle Bill there making a pig of himself." Literally calls him Beetle Bill. And then Ringo, in an interview, after John and George died, Ringo in an interview says, "Now it's only 2. And it's a drag, it's William, but I'm sure he's okay."
Yeah.
That's a direct quote. And then there's a funny one with Dana Carvey. Dana Carvey, who's co-starred in Wayne's World. He told a story on some show about meeting who he thought was Paul McCartney, but it was Billy at the time. And he, goes up to him and tells him, "Oh, I really like, your song Fool on the Hill." And he kind of recites some lyrics. And then he says, Paul got really excited. But then he says, I think in a mistake, that's the thing with Billy. When explaining that you could reference obscure parts of songs, he would get really excited. He says, that's the thing with Billy. So they've called him Billy multiple times publicly on camera. It has been revealed. It's out in the open. Whether or not those were slips, I personally probably think that it's coded. Freemasonic coding language. They know how to do it in a way that almost bypasses your conscious mind,
right?
Until you go back and look at it under a microscope. And go, wait a minute, no.
Hold up.
Yeah,
and let's not. I don't think we gave this a fair shot. Billy Shears may not have even known he was a different person. We're talking about such deep,
meta right there.
Such a deep level of mind control and drug-induced mania and all this stuff that... Here, let me switch over. That he might have been so fucking brainwashed and fried full of acid, Project Bluebird style, that he might have woken up Jason Bourne style later.
That'd be crazy.
I'm not Paul.
Can you imagine how wild that'd be?
I think he was well aware. I mean, definitely look into the memoirs of Billy Shears' book. Very revealing. It seems like he knew he was the greatest actor of all time.
Okay, but the Billy Shears thing, isn't that, just to be fair here, isn't that almost like a tongue-in-cheek thing, anonymously published, where someone's like, if I were Billy Shears, I'd be talking like this. But you're saying we could interpret that, or we could say this is the real Billy Shears telling all under the guise of a comedic
It's hard to tell. Honestly. It reads like Billy told Thomas Hugh Harriet the story, and then Thomas wrote it all down. It kind of reads like that, but there's probably some falsehood mixed in with the truth. Who knows how much, what percentage of what, but you've heard Alex Jones say I'm the best actor in the world because he's playing this role as Alex Jones, whereas previously he was playing the role of Bill Hicks. That's my opinion. People don't have to agree with that. And I think even you might see the same thing with John Lennon. Does anyone maybe drop some apples in the chat if you've heard that John Lennon might have taken on a different role after his death as a well-known owner of the computer company Apple, Steve Jobs?
Oh, you dog.
No, he's shaking his head. I'm 50-50 on this. It could be, but so there's a weird gap in Lennon's life, going back to John Lennon, between 1975 and 1980. He's completely out of the public eye. 5 years, but before his death, he's completely out of the public eye. Quote, to stay home with his family. Yeah, it's in Florida too. But that's when Steve Jobs comes out. 1976 is when Apple computer starts to come out, and he's on TV doing all this stuff. Now, I find it hard to believe because Steve Jobs has such a great American accent, and it just doesn't seem like John could have necessarily pulled that off. But when you compare the features, when you compare the glasses, when you compare, the timeline, it kind of adds up. And not to mention in 1984, this is after John Lennon's alleged death, there's a picture of Steve Jobs showing Yoko Ono and Sean Lennon how to use the first Apple computer. So Steve Jobs is in their apartment in 1984. And when you look at
That'd be crazy.
when you look at the death of John Lennon, it's just so fishy. All the details don't make any sense. Not to mention the alleged murderer was totally MK Ultra'd and totally handled by the CIA. What was his name? Anyways, I didn't see any apples. I'm not looking, but no, it looks like people haven't heard that.
It was Andy Warhol and Sean Lennon, I think, or at least from the picture I'm looking.
Yep, and Andy Warhol. I think Yoko was there as well.
Yeah, but Sean's the Asian one.
Okay.
Her baby, her baby with
Right.
John was Sean.
Mm-hmm.
Now, guys, this is where it gets trippy. Okay, the Beatles broke up in Florida. John apparently spent some more time in Florida and eventually would wind up buying a house in Palm Beach, Florida, Palm Beach Island, where Trump lives, where the Kennedys lived. This is something else we should have talked about. Apparently, Paul McCartney was a John JFK, not a truther, but he was very interested in the JFK assassination. He was infatuated with it. And he would use references to the JFK assassination in a lot of his solo material. And I think some of the dates that Seth was playing with kind of would point to that too, right? Point to a common thread. But so we've got John Lennon. I'm going to share my screen here. John Lennon in Florida. This is from a website, Florida Irish Heritage Center. John Lennon died in New York City in 1980, but his spirit lives on through John Lennon Educational Tour Bus. What? Provided free hands-on programs. Oh, God. Keep your hands off the kids. Hands-on programs to hundreds of high schools, colleges, boys and girls clubs. Blah, 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 blah. Who cares? John Lennon in Florida. The Beatles formally ended in Orlando, Florida in 1974. The Dancing Elephant bookstore that I'm in started in 1972. So I don't know the first time John Lennon ever went in, but I know John Lennon started coming into this bookstore somewhat regularly, at least when he was in town, by 1980, right? He died in 1980 or 81, 1980. So by 78, 79, 80, he was almost certainly conversating with the previous owner of this bookstore that I'm standing in. His name was Tamaj. It's going to bring up Tamaj here in a little. At the end of 1974, after 3 years of court battles and acrimony, the final dissolution of the Beatles was about to happen. Okay, right. We already went through this. Yeah, says the same thing about the Stars, but now here's him in Palm Beach. That's the house. I drive by it. Not recently, but when I worked on Palm Beach Island, I drove by this every single day on my way to work. That house is still there. It still looks almost just like that. During the last few years of his life, John Lennon, Yoko Ono, and their son, Sean, spent winter vacation time in Palm Beach in West Palm Beach, Florida. While there, Lennon consulted with well-known metaphysicist and spiritual advisor Tamaj Berger.
Hey-yo.
He's like our grandpa at this point, my brother and I. He's like our grandpa. But he is the previous owner of the Rainbow Bridge, the Dancing Elephant bookstore. And he became friends with John Lennon because John Lennon started coming into his shop. Lennon and Berger were making plans to open a spiritual learning center together. In 1980, Lennon purchased the sprawling El Solano mansion, the former home of Harold Vanderbilt, shown above, located on Ocean Boulevard in Palm Beach. Lennon was murdered outside his New York City apartment on December 8th, 1980, ending plans for life in Palm Beach. Well, he had a place to stay before that, so I think he had 2 places on Palm Beach, but he ended up buying this one right towards the end of his life. But he had been going into Rainbow Bridge for at least a couple of years before then.
Has he ever said anything about like anything behind John Lennon's death? Like, have you guys ever talked about that?
Yep, I'm gonna get to that. That's the juicy story here. He claims to know the real reason John Lennon died. The real reason. But let's read this here. John Lennon's Florida connections on his birthday. They bring up Tamaj. John's connection with our environs grew firmer during the final years of his life when he, Yoko, and their son Sean began making a habit of spending their winters in Palm Beach. The rumors swirled that Lennon intended to open a local spiritual learning center, a project he discussed in depth with a local metaphysicist and philosopher named Tamaj Berger. As part of their preparation, the Lennons bought El Solano. Oh, wow. So I didn't know that. So I guess they might have even planned on hosting this thing at that mansion. I thought he just wanted to live in it, but looks like that's what he bought the mansion for, as this article reads it. They wanted that big, spiritual to be at the mansion. Once belonged to the Vanderbilts. Likewise, Tamaj still bases his own operation in Palm Beach, having owned the Rainbow Bridge bookstore, library, and museum, where he continues to hold court even today. So yeah, pretty much the same story. Now let's tell the story of how he died. So Tamaj knew John Lennon like that, and they were planning to have like a little center on Palm Beach Island, like a local thing, local collaboration. And then, according to Tamaj privately, I don't think this is in the newspaper, and there's a lot of newspaper articles about that too. I just went off websites. Apparently, they had plans for something even bigger, like a full-blown university, an occult university planned in the Midwest, like Montana or some shit like that. And that was going to be a big facility, almost like a cult leader type thing, not really, but a big piece of land with spiritual well-being being like the main thing. Now that was their plan. John Lennon dies 1980. At least a year or so before that, John Lennon, coming into the bookstore, we saw that he was interested in astrology. Tamaj is a very good astrologer. Tamaj and Lennon, they would talk about all sorts of things. They would talk about astrology, reincarnation, whatever. And they knew each other pretty well by then, right? John Lennon had these plans and he really meant it. So he held Tamaj in very high esteem. And to me, Tamaj is the only real teacher, master, guru, that I've ever had. Like the only person I can turn to that I really know with something really deep that the internet's not going to have the answer for. Tamaj is that guy. And Sun and Mensch, has met Tamaj too. So he can kind of attest to this, that Tamaj is a wise guy. He's a real wizard, Anything you want to say about him?
Oh yeah, he's definitely from the old world. One of the last remnants of it. Like his story is so funny, and how he's like breezed through life and and he's such a funny. Like he only eats strawberries. His diet is strawberries and coffee. Like that's all it is.
Bread
And
and
it's like
fresh bread and cheese.
yeah, you have to be like feeding off some sort of ethers if that's what you got to have some sort of energies keeping you vibrant when that's all you're straight acidic diet. But I remember like the first time I met him, there he is.
Wow.
That's Tamaj, folks.
That's him with the sunlight kissing his face in the morning.
That's
Oh
Tamaj.
my god, literally like a troll. Look at those sideburns, bro.
He's Longo's handler.
Yeah, literally.
For real.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
But I remember he was like talking, saying stuff, and then he just like goes off into how he like knew Abraham Lincoln. He was like, yes, and back in the day, Abraham Lincoln, he was a truthful man, but like he was like he was like a consultant to Abraham. Like he was just sizzling between timelines, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But that's
Dude,
Tamash.
Dude, what?
Tamashi 6'9".
Dude, you're not subscribed to the Palm Beach Post, bro?
Dude, this is embarrassing, Longo.
Yeah,
Dude, the arms, dude. Guys, he's not grabbing anything, by the way. That's just his natural posture.
Yeah.
He's not like leaning on a bar or anything.
That's Tamaj. I hope they have a picture of him when he's young. He's like 85.
Oh, bless his heart.
There he is when he's young. Look at
There's
this.
that boy.
Look at him when he's young. Handsome guy.
What's his astrology?
He's an Aquarius. So him and John would have gotten along pretty well. Libra and Aquarius.
Yeah.
And now that comes into it, astrology. Keep that in mind, people. You know, that's been a little bit of a thread throughout all this, the astrology. Well, Tamaj, I respect him a lot. Anyone who knows their stuff about astrology and the occult knows Tamaj is the real deal. And John Lennon, I know, would have been equally infatuated with him. You know, he seemingly has all the answers, or, you know, gives that impression. Well, John Lennon is going into the store regularly, probably asks him about stuff all the time and gets exactly the answer he's looking for. Well, there was something going on. Oh, and I should say this. Tamaj's strongest connection to John Lennon was not simply that John lived here for a little bit and that he came into the bookstore. It's that when John and Yoko needed a nanny, needed a caretaker for their child, Tamaj actually recommended a nanny who was a man who would go on to be their long time nanny, who'd turn into an assistant and eventually just like a helper of the family. That's Tamaj's friend who he recommended to them, and he stuck with the family even after John died. So even after John died, Tamaj got to stay at one of the Lennon houses because he was still friends with this guy, with this nanny. And I don't think Tamaj liked Yoko. I don't think we've talked about it too much. But Tamaj had given him advice, and John valued his sage advice, right? But one day, John Lennon had a different request. One day, John Lennon came in and asked Tamaj, the previous owner of this bookstore, for help with something very disturbing. Tamaj, John Lennon and Yoko Ono had troubles. They had trouble conceiving. They had a lot of trouble getting pregnant. And when they consulted doctors, the doctor said, yeah, you guys don't have a chance of getting pregnant, you know. Or actually, I don't remember, but they said you can't get pregnant. And I think they said we don't know why, right? But pretty much said, sorry, we can't really help you. You know, modern medicine can't do anything for you. Not then, at least, not 1978 or whatever. Now, this is Sean Lennon we're talking about. John Lennon died 1980. So the baby that they're trying to conceive is Sean Lennon, who's actually like a junior, because John found out he was Irish towards the end of his life, that he was mostly Irish, not much English. So he wanted to name his child Sean instead of John, because John is anglicized. So keep that in mind. Sean Lennon's almost like a junior. And Sean Lennon's the Asian one, if you've ever seen pictures of him. Julian Lennon's is fully white. Sean Lennon's the Asian one. But Sean wasn't born yet. And in fact, they couldn't conceive Sean. They're having a lot of trouble. Yoko and John. Maybe this had to do with black magic. Maybe this had to do with poor diet. Who knows? Stress, even, stress. Could have been blood type, race mixing, whatever. But Western medicine can't help them. Modern medicine can't help them. So what does John do? He goes into the Rainbow Bridge and asks Tamaj, hey man, do you know anything? Do you know any tricks? We can't get pregnant. Is there anything that you know of? Magic, astrology, herbs, tinctures, anything. I really need to have a kid with Yoko. Tamaj says, essentially, sorry, man, that's beyond my pay grade. That's too much. That's like real. That's beyond ceremonial magic. You're asking to kind of play God a little bit. Tamaj didn't like it, or at least said, I can't help you. From what I've heard, John pushed a little bit and said, well, what about like black magic? Do you know anyone? Can you point me in the right direction? I need to have this kid.
And Tamaj told you he like requested black magic like that?
Yep. Black magic was discussed. And Tamaj says, I don't know that stuff. That's, this is like, I do astrology, I do the tarot, but that's like almost child's play compared to this. You're talking about witchcraft. You're talking about black magic. You're talking about playing God. Now, Tamaj, I don't think he gave him any leads. I think he just cut it off and said, sorry, man, I can't help you with that. Yeah, Tamaj is a white magician. Tamaj does white magic. Tamaj is a long-time vegetarian, long-time right-hand path type of guy. Not perfect, but he's
don't let the looks fool you, folks. He
can be annoying sometimes. He can be a grouchy old guy sometimes, but he is typically great character, great guy. Tamaj is a jewel. He's a Florida treasure. Okay, and he served the country. He served in the armed forces for America, so he's technically a veteran. Now, Tamaj didn't help him, but being his main kind of consultant in the magical community, I guess Tamaj learned, either because he was told or because he heard from the assistant, the nanny, that Tamaj said, John found someone to help him. He found somebody that was willing to help or take a stab at it. And that somebody was, according to Tamaj, a Brazilian, like Amazonian or Brazilian shaman, magician, folk magician.
Actual Brazilian?
Yes, not just an actual Brazilian. South America, Brazil. Not Barizriel. Not Bariziel. We're talking about Brazil. Now, John and Yoko having trouble conceiving. They find this Brazilian magician, witch doctor, who's willing to help, who claims to be able to help. But even she tells them what it's going to take. And I can't theorize too much or speculate too much. I'm trying not to speculate too much. But it was communicated to John Lennon in some way by this witch doctor. I'm gonna mute you up. Sorry, it's a little noisy. That the witch doctor communicated to John Lennon in some way. This is going to cost a life. This is not just like some small, easy little fertility thing where we're just going to make you more fertile. This is a guarantee life. She's going to give you a baby. I can get you a baby, is pretty much what she's saying. Did you want to pop in?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna like say how that's usually like the deal, you know. It's like blood for blood, you know, all this Santeria, South American voodoo magic that they still practice. You got to go to these little cabanas to do your dirty workings, and also like I think Bill Clinton, the Clintons famously have like visited a witch doctor and like have like described how amazing an experience that was. Same with Obama, like going to Africa and like doing some weird ish. But yeah, it's especially if they're infertile, they're gonna have to do like, you know, they're resorting to some dirty tricks.
Yeah. Now, John, I don't know if John knew who that life was, but basically, John consents to the ceremony, to the ritual. From what I've heard, blood was needed. Blood had to be used, or some hair, you know, some biological material. And that John willfully engaged in this. Now, I'm not saying he knows what the outcome was, but he went forward with it. I don't know if they thought this was going to be like an animal that had to die, or if a local was going to die, or someone they'd never even met. But I'll tell you where this goes. John Lennon does this ritual with Yoko to conceive Sean Lennon, the junior. If you keep in mind that John and Sean are the same name, just English and Irish, that's his junior. And that's important. Now, John and Yoko, they're successful. And I'm not going to speculate as to the specifics of the ritual and everything. I don't know. I'll only try and say what I know for sure, what I've heard. But they went through with it. They leave. Seemingly everything's okay. And Yoko gets pregnant. Now let's check Sean Lennon birthday. Sean Lennon. Ooh. Okay, so this is early. This is 1975. So Sean Lennon's 1975. That's 5 years before he died. The bookstore opened in 1972. So it had to be in those 3 years, 72 to 75, that this ritual was going on. And 74 is when the Beatles break up for good. I didn't realize this was all scrunched in together very tight in the same timeline. But that's true. So 1975, Sean Lennon is born. Sean Lennon's birthday is October 9th. Okay. So he's born October 9th, 1975. Now, when is the day that John Lennon died?
Allegedly.
December 8th, 1980. Okay. Now, Tamaj believes that from what he heard and from what he learned, it was John who himself paid for the life of his son. And I guess 5 years later, I guess they bought themselves 5 years together. But when Sean was 5 years old, John had to go. John had to die.
And John's death date is 13 years to the day after Magical Mystery Tour was released in the UK. And there's a lot of correlation between December 8th and 9/11. There's 88 days between the two.
Now, Sean Lennon, let's look at him. Sean Lennon, born October 9th. You guys see that over there? October 9th. And he believes, Tamaj believes that John paid the price for Sean to be born. And he believed that John especially cared about Sean, that he wanted him to be a junior, and that this was more of a meaningful child than kind of Julian. Not to trivialize him or anything, but John really, really, really wanted to get pregnant with Sean. Julian might have been an accident for all I know. I don't know. But Sean was intentional. Now, Tamaj believes the proof that it was John who paid the price is in their birthdays. Sean Lennon was born on October 9th. John Lennon was born on October 9th. Tamaj believes that that is almost like the bow on top, almost like the signature, almost like the fingerprint on the deed, the evidence, the clue, the breadcrumb, that John had to pay himself for almost another version of himself. Sean Lennon sounds just like John Lennon when he
I was
sings.
just about to say that. Yeah, they do sound very similar.
Sounds just like him. Yeah, we got a cop parked outside. Give me 1 sec here.
Boop, boop. If I may just talk a little bit about John Lennon's alleged death. The details are very sketchy because there was some Daily Mail, UK video about this. There's a journalist who sort of blew the case open and found the notepads of the police officers who were taking notes that day. There were no details written down. Basically said case closed. It seemed like a cover up. There was no funeral for John Lennon. That's interesting. And the guy who allegedly shot him, Mark David Chapman, claims to not really know what he was doing. It seems like a Manchurian Candidate type of thing.
Right.
And there's a comment from some YouTube video. I'm sorry, I didn't write the commenter's name down, but he said the CIA recruited Mark David Chapman at the Refugee Rescue Organization in Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, where he worked as a volunteer. The refugee rescue camp was run by the Christian charity group known as the World Vision. The CIA was using this guise of Christian charity to recruit people with nothing to lose in this camp and brainwash them with murderous attitudes to become Manchurian candidates, basically. And a man by the name of John Warnock Hinckley Sr. was on the board of directors at World Vision. Hinckley Sr. was a longtime friend of George H.W. Bush who funded the assassins training camp at Fort Chaffee. That dude's son, Hinckley Jr., was the man who attempted to assassinate Ronald Reagan on March 30th, 3381. And Mark Chapman was also visited by Milton Klein, who was a CIA MKUltra doctor. So it's the details are sketchy. There's a Manchurian candidate. He didn't know what he was doing. We see this story again and again. People kind of get brainwashed into doing things that they regret. And then there's also, he was obsessed with Catcher in the Rye. And Longo, you mentioned you wanted to bring that back up, Catcher in the Rye. And I was wondering, is that the connection with Mark David Chapman, the alleged murderer of John Lennon? I don't know if he can hear me now, but yeah, apparently that guy was obsessed with Catcher in the Rye as well. So the details are just sketchy there.
Yeah, they are. And especially with these like Manchurian candidates, they use some sort of like cue to get them into their programming. So like books were popular, and who knows, like these authors, kind of like the music, there's also like these authors that make these sci-fi novels and stuff for equally like, like propagandy, brainwashy reasons. And like A Catcher in the Rye is big on, like the phonies, getting rid of the phonies, rebelling against authority and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't really know.
No, you're right, though.
The assassin's background that much, but yeah.
Have you heard? Go ahead.
I was going to say, Daniel Ponce commented, the doorman at the Dakota on the night of Lennon's death was a CIA contract assassin. So Mark David Chapman was just a distraction and a patsy. That could very well be true. It seems like it might be. And about the books, I recently listened to Kathy O'Brien's book, Transformation of America.
Dude, no way. That book dude.
It's insane.
That's
book
crazy
is so
that you read it, because I don't think anybody has ever really read.
I listened to it on audiobook. It's super disturbing, but she said that they used Alice in Wonderland as one of her triggers to turn her on into the, into an alternate, one of her fractured psyches into like a different. I forget the term for when one of her personalities, or you can trigger alters. Exactly, they can trigger a new alter, and so maybe Catcher in the Rye was used for him, one of his alters.
For sure, yeah.
Have you, speaking of literature, have you heard the theory, since we're laying it all out there tonight, have you heard the theory that Chapman is actually Stephen King?
Whoa!
I see that if you got liposuction.
You haven't heard that one, Paul?
I haven't heard that.
I mean, I just called you Paul. Hang on. Paul? Are you Paul, Seth?
Are you good?
Paul's a vegan. We know Paul's a vegan today.
The Beatles.
The modern fake Billy Shears Paul is a vegan, and he looks pretty good for like 80.
Damn, is Seth Paul? Loki? Heike?
I'm Elliot Thez. Put some spec on my name.
Yeah. Name's Elliot Thez.
What's his name?
Charmed, I'm sure I'm Swiv Lenitze.
Okay, here, look at this. LennonMurder.com.
Yes.
Damn, what is this?
LennonMurderTruth.com.
Full schizo, dude.
Stephen King killed John Lennon. Dude.
What?
Yep. There's a whole theory about it. Whole line.
And then he just decides to become a fire author.
Well, think about the stories Stephen King pumps out. I mean, they're MKUltra, fairy tale, nightmare stories.
Wet dreams,
yeah.
He's a fucking pervert, fat pervert too. But yeah, let's see if they got a good picture. Boom. So also Stephen King famously lost a ton of weight at some point in like the 80s or 90s or something. But he was very, very hefty to start out.
Yeah, I don't think it's the same guy, but it's interesting.
Stephen King killed Steve Jobs, dude.
Yeah.
And then they both pull their masks off, and it was Colin Farrell the whole time.
it was fucking Colin Farrell as Scott Stapp the whole time.
He's like, "Hey, Jewel,
Yeah.
don't let me down. You'll take
Just
a
stand
sad song."
So good. Oh my god.
Yeah,
I think what we can take away is that like nothing is as it seems. Everything's fake. The only thing that's not is your friends and your family and the trees outside. Everything else is the Matrix. You can't trust any of it.
Can I say one little extra thing? Okay. The last little bit of the Sean Lennon story comes a little close to home. I'll be honest. Okay.
Don't sugarcoat it, Doc.
Well, in 2017, I was on the run from the police. Okay. I was living in a house with my dad, my girlfriend at the time, and a friend. And I pretty much never left the city. I was like hiding in my house, kind of selling a little weed. Okay, that's why. That's what it was all about. Nothing crazy. And big long story, but my dad was in rough shape. Okay. Now, this was way before Tamaj, way before the bookstore. And I was selling weed, and I was having nightmares about getting arrested, nightmares about getting robbed. I was doing okay for myself, but it was a little tough. It was a little stressful, worried about the police. Now, one day I decided, because a friend suggested, that I'd go to a music festival in New Orleans, Voodoo Fest. Big bands were going to be there. Tool, who I really liked at the time. Cage the Elephant, who I've seen like 3 times. I can't think of who else, but Tool alone was worth going for, right?
Foo Fighters, bro.
Were they there?
That's what Google says. 2017?
Yeah, 2017, maybe 2016, but I think 2017. Tool. If Tool was there, yeah, that's the one. But I was 19, and I was worried about getting arrested because I had a warrant out for my arrest. But I went to this festival, and it was the first big thing I did to leave town. First time I left town in like a year. And I was like afraid to drive, kind of, you know. But I took a bus ride. So that's how I was like, okay. I'll be safe on the bus. No one will even know, you know. I go to New Orleans, and that was also the first time that I'd been away from my dad for, you know, more than a couple days. Like I said, he was in rough shape. Big whole long story. I won't go too deep into it, but he was in rough shape, and I was worried that he might pass away before that. But that had been a long thing. And I said, you know, can't live my whole life in fear, right? Can't stay here the whole time trying to take care of him. So I just went and got like rewarded myself pretty much. Going to go out of town, go see this music festival. And I go to New Orleans. I'm staying with a friend. I think I'm going to have the time of my life. I brought a little acid, brought a bunch of weed. And I'm walking in to Voodoo Festival in the morning. It's a little heavy. Okay. Admittedly, it's a little bit heavy. I'm walking in to Voodoo Festival. And by the way, Sean Lennon's a musician. He has a band. And he was in a band with Les Claypool. And Les Claypool, really good bassist, like the best bassist ever. I really like Les Claypool, so that's someone I wanted to see. I didn't really know Sean Lennon, but they were in a band. Their music was okay, and I was going to go see that too. They were opening for Tool. So I'm on my way there to go see Sean Lennon at Voodoo Fest. And when I'm walking in, I get the call, walking into the festival, that my dad had passed away. On the way to go see Sean Lennon. And luckily I didn't trip acid yet, but I had it with me, gave it to someone else. I gave my acid to someone who had just got kicked out of the army the day before. Real crazy. That guy was having a weird day too. I was actually I was in a costume festival, or it was like a Halloween festival. I was in a costume shop when I actually got the call. It was some heavy news, but I'd been expecting it for kind of a long time. That always, of course, you'd imagine, stuck with me. And Sean Lennon never meant jack shit to me. But there were other things about that were weird synchronicities. That was 2017. Fast forward to 2022, I hear this story for the first time. I realize that's the same Sean Lennon whose dad, according to Tamaj, sacrificed himself so that his son could go live. That's the Sean Lennon. Sean Lennon, and I didn't know any of that until Tamaj told us that story about Sean Lennon. And then, his dad, I don't know. I just thought that was relevant. And it was a weird, creepy connection. And how many people by the name of Ward do you know, Austin? Ward.
Why are you asking me specifically?
Just a survey.
Do I not look like I know a lot of wards, bro?
How many wards?
3.
Really?
No, I don't. I only know your friend Ward.
Okay. Seth, how many wards do you know? Do you know any wards?
I know last name Ward.
Okay. Which one?
No. Justin.
Okay.
Shout out.
And Seth, you're from New Orleans. Not originally, but
I didn't grow up there, but yeah. I lived there.
Now, when I got that call that my dad passed away, I was with a friend from summer camp who didn't live in my state. I'd only seen him because I was in his hometown. My brother was with a different friend from that same summer camp in a different state, only with him because he happened to be in his town. The friend that I was with when I got that call, right next to, his name was Mason Ward. Shout out Mason Ward if you're listening to this. I don't know. Who cares if the story gets back to him? That's his name. Mason Ward.
And what does that mean?
Well, Mason means Mason.
I know, but what's the relevance?
My brother was with our friend named Ward Sprouse. So we were both with someone named Ward. First name in his case, last name in my case. I just thought that was interesting. And ward means like protection or to keep away, right? Ward off something. But that name always stuck with me, of course, Ward. It was just a weird synchronicity. And I don't know. I still watched the concert, if anyone's wondering. I found out, got some heavy news, was waiting on a bus ride to go home, so it's not like it's not like I could just hop on an early plane and leave. I stayed through the concert. I was with a girlfriend, I was with a group, and it was pretty uncomfortable, but I stayed through the concert and watched Sean Lennon. And not that it matters, but Sean was playing a tricked out version of the same guitar that I owned, my only guitar at the time. So maybe that doesn't mean too much to everyone out there, but I thought that was relevant. And those that weird dad connection with Sean Lennon goes deeper than just the bookstore. So
no, dude, that's well, thank you for sharing your very personal experience. I mean, it does tie it all together, and it's very synchronous. And I think even it being Voodoo Fest, in New Orleans, kind of being like a vortex of magical energy, and the father-son connection, the musical connection, the time and the dates, and like, it does seem very synchronous. And I just appreciate you sharing, and that's heavy stuff, bro.
Thanks, man. Sorry, I made all that shit up. Just kidding. But no, that's true. And I think that's it. Let's see. Is there any other? I think you wanted to say one or two things about Sean Lennon, about he's also very into the occult, open about his occult influences.
Well, we mentioned it before that he's in Claypool Delirium, or the Lennon Claypool Delirium. Mm-hmm. And when we were talking about John Lennon playing with Frank Zappa, I'm like, Sean Lennon and Claypool sort of like the new generation version of that. It's like a psychedelic, this like the psychedelic rock star mixed with the Lennon Beatle. And yeah, they have this really trippy music video. What's the name of that song? Whatever. We talked about it earlier.
Also, Lennon or Les Claypool is like, he's also stuck in like this Colonel. He's the Colonel. He's like a fake Colonel Sanders. They call him the Colonel. He wears like a
Revolutionary War
cowboy. He wears like a Confederate, like Civil War outfit a lot of the times. And I like Les Claypool. I like his playing. He's, very talented. But he also strikes me as like a Rick Rubin-esque character. He's got this kind of mystique.
He does
about him, and
like he knows more than he puts off.
Yeah, and Buckethead too with the KFC. Les Claypool, Buckethead, the whole psych, whatever. But we're at 3 hours 30 minutes. We got 830 in the chat. We peaked at like 850. Thanks for being here, everyone. What else is there to say? You want to give just a couple like examples of Sean Lennon's occult? You sent me something with his he's into like Jack Parsons, and he has a song about Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons.
Wait, everybody just go watch the music video for Blood and Rockets. Look up Claypool, Lennon, Blood and Rockets, and just watch that video. It's interesting. And in the second movement, when they switch to 5/4 time, to a 5/4 time signature, all these stars and pentagrams come up on the screen. So I think they knew what they're doing with the numerology, the pentagrams and stuff like that. And then if I can just leave it with one last quote from John Lennon. This is from a 1980 Playboy magazine interview. He said, "We must always remember to thank the CIA and the Army for LSD. That's what people forget. They invented LSD to control people." John Lennon, September 1980, Playboy magazine, right before he allegedly died. Or maybe that was right after. Maybe it came out right after. When did he die? Definitely 1980. Man, it's late. My brain is
it's all
mush,
good, dude.
and we've talked about a lot tonight.
You said it was Playboy magazine. He said that for, right? Which is also, come on, Hugh Hefner, CIA. There you have it. And also that picture of Sean, he looks like Haley Joel Osment, the boy from the Sixth Sense, like now. But like an Asian American version.
Here, let me put a couple tunes out there, Seth, and then you want to play something to close?
Sure, I'll play something.
Close
us out, Seth. Elliot.
Also, you can get a couple licks in there if you.
No, I'll just listen.
I don't have a pick. I forgot to
I'll
bring
just dance.
Forgot to bring a pick, but I know a couple Beatles songs on guitar. Me and Seth were talking about playing some Beatles songs. Yeah, it's my strat.
Yeah, dude.
Suck on
Thank
it,
you,
lizards.
Thelma.
Hang on. No.
Thank you, Joan and Jello.
I wish I had some old Playboys from 1980.
Put one in the air.
I'm not plugged in. I don't have a pick. But
he was part of the Laurel Canyon crew.
Not tuned either. But if you made it this far, you're going to get to see Dr. Longo play guitar for the first time ever on stream. And Seth's going to play a couple tunes here too, maybe. But I know Day Tripper, of course, everyone knows that one. Everyone knows that. That's like guitar class. That's like your guitar teacher teaches you the first song, but a song that's really hard to learn on the guitar. Not to be like, oh, but the chords and stuff. I saw her standing there, get into those lyrics, and hear. Let's see if it sounds better down here. I saw her standing there. That's the song where he goes, "She was just 17. You know what I mean?"
Yeah. It's like, no, we don't know what you mean. You can dance if you want to. You can leave your friends behind. Because your friends don't dance, and if they don't dance, well, they're no friends of mine.
Hang on, I can't hear. That's all. That's fucking rocking up. But yeah, Zet's got an acoustic, so you can definitely hear that one. But,
yeah, hopefully the noise cancellation doesn't cancel this out. I really like this tune.
You couldn't hear this?
No, we could a little bit, but it was cutting
came in and out.
Yeah, a little bit. Was that the first time you played guitar on stream?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, now we're talking.
All right, the show's over.
And your blues can sing, but you don't get me. You don't get me. You say you've seen 7 wonders and your crew is green, but you can't see me. You can't see me. Your prized possessions start to weigh you down. Look in my direction.
something like
Is that
that.
the Beatles?
Yeah, Xander Bird can sing from Revolver.
Okay.
Nice.
What were you playing earlier?
I really like
you were whistling Eleanor Rigby.
Yeah,
right?
I really like Eleanor Rigby, but one of my favorites is Lady Madonna, children at your feet.
That's not the Beatles.
Sublime,
bro.
right?
That's Sublime.
Wonder how you managed to make ends meet.
Damn, maybe Sublime copied that song.
When you pay the rent,
That's Sublime.
did you think that money was heaven?
It's the same. It's the same like cadence.
Suitcase. Sunday morning creeping like a nun.
They're asking us to do Korn. We gotta cover Korn, boys.
See how they are. Lady Madonna, baby at your breast, wonders how you make
With arms wide open
with arms wide
into the sunset.
So let's go there.
To this place.
And I'll stop out here.
Yo, if you think I'm skinny because I'm vegan, I've always been skinny, bro. Always, my whole life.
Don't listen to those haters, Elliot. They just want to be high vibe like you.
Yeah, that's damn right. Y'all wish you could sing like me. No, I can't. It's hard to sing Paul's range up high because I just have a lower voice. So definitely strain. That's not Sublime, you motherfuckers. I sang it in a bit of a reggae style, sure.
Yeah,
but
it sounded just like like that style that Sublime uses.
it's really a piano song. Lady Madonna.
Ooh.
Give us a couple more verses. Come on. People tipping.
Seriously, people are liking that acapella, that Acapulco acapella, bro.
Here, one more. Check this out.
There we go.
What the hell, bro?
Come on, Oz. Get in there.
Get in there.
Come on, Oz. They're saying let Austin harmonize in there.
I was harmonizing. No, they wanted you to, but I did it a little bit just now.
Nobody came, Father Mackenzie, wiping the dirt from the hands as he walks from the grave. No one was saved, all lonely people. Where do they all come from? All lonely people. Where do they all belong?
Boats and
Paul is
hoes.
dead. Paul is dead. Paul is dead. Paul is dead. Paul is dead.
Giacomo.
Paul is dead.
Yeah. With arms wide open.
Hell yeah.
Dude, I haven't played those songs in a while. I also just broke my wrist. That's the first time I played guitar in like many weeks.
Sounds good, dude.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Take me to the place. I'll show you everything.
So, peeps, that about does it. I'm sure there's some Beatle conspiracies we left out, but there's plenty of resources out there, plenty of truthers out there. Not hard to find. Search Beatles conspiracies. I would want to shout out The Winged Beetle. Great documentary type thing put together at least 10 years ago. That was one of my early big conspiracy rabbit holes that I went down, was the Paul is dead thing. Austin Sun and Mensch remembers back in 2016 watching Paul is dead videos in our friend's house. Paul is dead was like one of the big early ones for me. But
The Winged Beetle. You showed me that doc.
Yep.
Or what was it? The Black Beetle?
That's it. The Winged Beetle documentary.
Yeah.
And here we got one more chat.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for all the props.
Coincidence
that
theory.
whistling was wild.
With the 199, loved the whistling and guitar sounded amazing.
That was some Quentin Tarantino, Ennio Morricone type shit. You know what I'm saying?
And also, I just want to comment on the skinny musician thing. Okay, you show me one good fat fucking musician, and I'll give you $1,000. Okay,
$1,000.
One fucking one. Meatloaf sucks. Sublime, that guy's dead.
And he wasn't even that fat. He was like chunky, you know, he was chubby.
What's the other one? The blues band. What's the blues band? But the guy who sings like this all the time through we're not going down. Who's that one? You don't know that band? A really fat guy. Blues band.
Cannonball Adderley was a kind of a chubby sax player. He's one of the best.
Canned Heat.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Canned Heat had a fat singer, but they sucked too. Can't stand Canned Heat.
Go down the country where we gotta go.
I did a pretty good impression. Yeah, so name one fat good musician and then convince me why musicians should be eating steak all day. Okay. All the greatest musicians, everyone, and let's just state the obvious here. 90-pound guitar players like George Harrison get 11 out of 10 runway model girlfriends. You can go eat as many steaks as you want and put as many hours in the gym as you want. You're still going to have a dog of a girlfriend. You're going to have a dirty dog. I wouldn't even let eat out of a bowl in my backyard, okay?
Yeah, for real.
We got a bunch of dudes with wildebeest girlfriends, wildebeest wives,
Yeah.
talking about musicians being too skinny. You suck. You're talentless. You're stuck dating fat pigs because that's what most flesh eaters end up looking like. Yeah, come on in.
Yeah, doctor. If you're wondering where the wild things went, I know where they are, and it's that man's dog wife, bro.
Yeah, the
That's
where the
all I
wild
had to say.
And also, just to debunk the idea that this is because I'm a vegetarian, I'm almost 40, guys. I'm almost 40 years old. I've been vegan for four years, and I've always looked like this. My body's never changed since I was 18. So I've always looked like this. It has nothing to do with the fact that I eat oranges and lychees all day.
Yeah, exactly. And also, most of the skinniest people I've ever seen were flesh eaters who just ate like gas station food, and you know. And then also, you know that the majority of the world is mineral deficient. 2/3 of the world is mineral deficient. Let's see if you guys can do some math on this one. 2/3 of the world mineral deficient. Only 1/10 of the world, roughly 20% at most. Some say as few as 5%. Only, let's say 10% are vegetarian. 10% of the world is vegetarian/vegan. Even if it's 20, 2/3 of the world is mineral deficient. Only 10% is vegetarian. Who's more mineral deficient? Who's more mineral deficient? Flesh eaters are not only more likely to be mineral deficient, they account for the vast majority of people who are mineral deficient. Even if you assume that all 20% of vegetarians are mineral deficient, that still leaves a whole lot more. Forget about vegetarianism. Mineral deficiency is a thing in all diets, especially flesh-dependent diets, prone to mineral deficiency. So that's not that matters, but ultimately, everyone knows that smoking hot chicks like rock star dudes. If you're talented and you're skinny, a girl's going to like that way more than being a dumb, fucking talentless flesh eater.
I don't know the gals these days. You never know.
Every chick likes rock star skinny. Rock star skinny is what women actually like. Okay, you can trick a couple dumb survival based females with your big muscles and stuff, but
Yeah,
let's
that
keep
don't
it
last
real.
long.
So since we're talking about musicians, we might as well talk about even the musicians that don't eat, flesh, vegetarian. If you're a musician, you look like a musician. I look like someone who spends 10 hours a day on a computer. Someone who swings a sledgehammer all day is going to look like someone who swings a sledgehammer all day, regardless if they're vegetarian or not. You look like your lifestyle. Okay. And the rock star lifestyle, a lot better than the gym bro lifestyle. Okay. And clearly, we didn't get to talk about this, but since we're getting to it, you know how many chicks were pissing their pants in Beatles concerts, literally squirting through their pants?
A lot.
You can hear this. I'm not coming up with this. People who were at Beatles concerts in the mid 60s say that you could watch the liquid running down.
I don't know.
Always. Go look it up.
It's a river of piss and squirt, dude.
Go look it up.
Yeah, I'm sure it says it somewhere.
When you'd watch the Beatles in the 60s, there would be piss running down the floor because the girls could not contain themselves. They were literally jumping, screaming at the top of their lungs, fainting.
Yeah.
You think that's ever happened outside of a gym? Not even close.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Well, the gym I go to, it happens all the time.
Oh, yeah. YMCA?
Yeah, dude. You fit. Nah.
Well, all right. That's all I'd want to say is keep hating on skinny rock stars. They'll keep getting all the ladies. Okay. Even just look at this. Crypto billionaire, ripped gym bro, dirt poor musician. Who gets the better chicks? Everyone knows the answer.
Yeah, I mean, jacked people are scary. A woman doesn't want a big monster like an ogre of a man on top of her, unless she's got some like dom stuff going on,
Now, you know what? I think everyone convinced me. I think I'm not vegan anymore. I'm going to start eating meat tomorrow. No, seriously, I want to be fat. I want to have kidneys that shut down.
If that's what you want, Seth.
I want to eat blood. I want to sacrifice animals. Yeah, I think I'm done with veganism. I'm over it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The trick is you got to be talented, though. Okay, you got to be good at something. You got to be worth something. Okay. Otherwise, women won't look at you no matter what. Okay. But okay, that's it, folks.
Love you guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Everyone have a good night. Go check out Seth, the Fruit Companion, author of the Fruit Companion, and the Art of Unlearning, Science of Unlearning.
The School of Unlearning on YouTube.
The School of Unlearning on YouTube.
Everybody go to the School of Unlearning. I need some more subscribers.
Guys, go get him some subbies, okay? Get subbed up. Sun and Mensch on YouTube. Go check out Sun and Mensch. And we'll see you next Monday. I'll see you on Thursday. We'll see you on Monday. We'll do another band. Okay. Everyone have a good night. Good turnout tonight. Peace.